Within the next hour, executive orders from the border to energy to the federal government are expected today.
Hundreds of them, and it's looking like he will not wait to get back to the White House. Donald Trump expected to begin signing executive orders inside the Capitol following his swearing in, and may in fact sign more at the Capital One Center, the rally, the stadium that's waiting for Donald Trump following his luncheon today with lawmakers.
Yeah, that, of course, is a viewing area for those who were intending on being outside on the National Mall today to watch these proceedings. And, of course, it was also the scene of a rally, a pre-election rally that Donald Trump held at the Capital One Arena last night with this message.
The curtain closes on 4 long years of American decline, and we begin a brand new day of American strength and prosperity.
And as we prepare for ceremonies inside the Capitol Rotunda, we bring you live to Capitol Hill right now in Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. Anne-Marie?
Good morning, Joe. Good afternoon, Joe and Kaylee. We're waiting here for President Trump to be sworn in and then give his speech. The 45th President of the United States becomes, once again, President of the United States, 47th. The tone and tenor, though, this time around is obviously markedly different. You can just see the pictures on the screen of who is going to be there while he is sworn in. You have tech titans like Tim Cook, Jeff Bezos, Sundar Pichai, of course, also Elon Musk, someone who was with him last night at the Capital One Arena rally and who has been steadfast with him, most notably calling himself the first buddy throughout the entire campaign. So this is very different than when Trump was initially sworn in as the 45th president. As you said, after he gets sworn in, he is going to get to work like most presidents do. There will be a slew of executive orders wanting to undo a lot of what was done by previous administrations. We should note some of these could be performative and may get held up in court, but the message is clear. Donald Trump wants to go for tighter immigration policy, which we will see a number of executive orders today and executive actions. There will also be energy executive orders wanting to roll back some of the oil and drilling permits or the lack of banning of those permits that we saw under the Biden administration. And then, of course, one most notably that's taken really Washington, D.C. and Gen Z across the country by storm is TikTok. President Trump says he wanted to make sure TikTok was restored for his big inauguration day, and he wants to sign an executive order to give the company 90 more days, an extension to be able to divest. He talked about this yesterday in a statement, saying that the company should be 50% American-owned, so that is something else we'll be watching today. The festivities, of course, are inside, as Kaylee mentioned, just because of the frigid weather here in Washington, D.C. So after he does a lot of the meetings he has here on Capitol Hill with some members of his cabinet and also members of Congress, he then will go greet a lot of supporters just down the road at the Capitol Arena.
Well, and Anne-Marie, for our audience on Bloomberg TV, we've been looking at pictures, live pictures from inside the Rotunda, where we see assembled with some of those tech titans you mentioned, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, standing together with those who have been tapped to be in Donald Trump's cabinet in this second administration. Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, all standing there together in the Rotunda. Just walk us through as well how quickly some of those could become officially confirmed after Donald Trump takes the oath of office.
Right. I'm also seeing now, I believe that's Susie Wiles, the individual who's going to be the chief of staff for the president, the first female chief of staff in American history, an individual President Trump likes to call her Ice Baby. She's given some interviews since, and she really wants to maintain almost a moat around President Trump and the access people are going to have into him. Wait and see on potentially how quickly we can see some of these confirmations come to be. We should get Marco Rubio, of course, for Secretary of State. That'll be the easiest one. That should come this evening, and he will sail through Senate confirmation. It does seem that the Trump transition team want to make sure the national security individuals are in place, but potentially there, of course, could be some hiccups if the Democrats want to delay some of that. But Senator John Thune, the majority leader now, says he will have everyone here all morning and all night to try to get Trump's cabinet in place as quickly as possible.
All right, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern, thank you. We'll be checking in with you throughout the day as we see now live on Bloomberg TV. The Supreme Court justices entering the Rotunda will, of course, be Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who will issue the oath of office to the Vice President elect, soon-to-be Vice President J.D. Vance, and, of course, the swearing-in of Donald Trump as the 47th president will be done by the Chief Justice, John Roberts. And as we look ahead to that official swearing-in, joining us now is our signature political panel and Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, Stone Court Capital partner, alongside Jeannie Shanzano, senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress and political science professor at Iona University. It's a historic day. It's lovely to have you both for it. Rick, we've seen some excerpts of the address Donald Trump will give after taking the oath of office. He talks about a thrilling new era of national success. Just how different will this era be, not just to the last 4 years of Joe Biden, but to the first Donald Trump era?
Yeah, 8 years ago, we were sitting here talking about the new Trump era, and it was a dark era, right? He was talking about, how much trouble the country was in and how it's decayed so badly, and really roundly criticized for an inaugural address. It sounds like this year it's going to be much more mainstream and uplifting. And his advisors have been, predicting this to the media lately, saying, no, this is the new Donald Trump, where he's optimistic about the future and believes that through his leadership, the country will raise up to new heights never seen before. So I think we can expect a much more traditional inaugural address where people feel good about the future administration rather than concerned about the future of their country.
The Trumps began their day at Blair House. They spent the night inside the White House complex and had tea, per the tradition, with the outgoing president and first lady. The Bidens welcomed the Trumps at the South Portico today. Jeannie, the North Portico, I should say. What was that moment like for you as a Democrat to see this happen in reverse?
Yeah, I think it just is a reminder of the stark difference between when Donald Trump exited office last time and Joe Biden was coming in. And Donald Trump did leave a letter, which we understand Joe Biden did today for his successor, but they famously left Washington, D.C., did not attend the inauguration. So there is a stark difference, and I think the Bidens are doing absolutely the right thing. I think Democrats, if they are going to complain about a loss of tradition and a loss of, this sort of American way in which we transfer power peacefully, they've got to abide by those traditions as well. And so I give the Bidens credit. I also think today it's just a really stark reminder of the nature of Donald Trump's comeback. Yeah. January 6th, 4 years ago, if any of us were sitting here, would not have thought that he would be coming back. This is a comeback for the ages, probably the greatest comeback in American history, whether you like or voted for Donald Trump or not.
And we've just seen Donald Trump's children entering the rotunda. Barron Trump, of course, finishing out the line, but Don Jr., Eric Trump, Ivanka, all walking into the rotunda, joining the rest of the Trump family. We saw Lara Trump, his daughter-in-law and the former co-chair of the RNC, enter a bit earlier. As we consider, Jeannie, that this is not just Donald Trump's first day in office, but Joe Biden's last, before leaving, he issued preemptive pardons to Mark Milley, the general, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the members and staff who worked on the January 6th committee in Congress. How does that change the tenor of what we're about to see place? Everything you just everything you just said about their orchestrating this peaceful transfer of power, and yet Biden in some ways suggesting that he doesn't fully trust this incoming administration to be the democratic force that typically presidents are.
Yeah, preemptive pardons go back at least to Abraham Lincoln, so they are not unfounded. I am not myself a fan of them. In part because what it does is it suggests that the person accepting them is guilty. And we've heard from some of these folks who got preemptively pardoned who say, we are not guilty of anything. And thank you so much, Mr. President, but I don't want it. I do think it's incredibly problematic. I also don't think it does the job necessary, because I think we may see a shift to charges filed against some of these folks at the state level where they could not be pardoned, and attorney generals like in Texas and elsewhere who will take on this charge. So I don't think it resolves the issue. So I think it was a problem for Joe Biden to do this. He, of course, has now issued more pardons and commutations than any one-term president in American history, which is quite remarkable. This one, I think he missed the mark on. I don't think they should have done it.
I'll be curious to see how many actually accept these pardons. Denver Riggleman, for instance, the former congressman, said right at this table that he would not accept a pardon. If offered, he would love for that to go to trial because he believes he did nothing wrong. But, Rick, when we consider the peaceful transition of power, the traditions that we're witnessing today, can you imagine being in the room for that tea in the White House this morning? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, I would have loved to have been fly on the wall when they were together, because there's so much history with these two individuals. I mean, never before have you seen, the two presidents have fought each other for so long to now actually pour tea with one another. It was 140 years ago that Grover Cleveland came back into the White House after a term in exile. And so we haven't seen this happen very often. And you can't begrudge the fact that, even this morning, as you were talking about, President Biden issuing these pardons, not because these people did anything wrong, but because he's fearful that the man sitting across from him is going to prosecute them for doing their jobs. So, I mean, the history is incredible, but you also see a passage of time. Joe Biden, the oldest president in history, is giving away to the newest oldest president in history, both of which are lame ducks the day Donald Trump gets sworn in today.
Amazing. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano will stay with us throughout our special broadcast, and great to have our signature panel with us. We want to bring you to the White House right now. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall is on the North Lawn as the physical transfer of belongings takes place in the building behind her. How's the mood today, Tyler?
Yeah, Joe, well, I spoke to one Trump transition official who told me to expect staff under the incoming administration to start unboxing their things here at the White House at 12:01 Eastern and not a minute later. It is clear that this incoming administration wants to portray that it is more organized, perhaps, than 8 years ago when Donald Trump first came to Washington, having no experience holding public office. And a lot of that is going to have to do with this expected flurry of executive orders that you've been discussing. And while Trump has floated that he could sign for potentially more than 100 executive orders during his first day in office. For context, he signed 55 executive orders during his first year in office. But as we wait for the ceremony to get underway, at this point in the transition, it is markedly calm here at the White House after President-elect Trump visited earlier with President Biden for a ceremonial tea and coffee meeting, resuming a tradition that he did not extend to Biden 4 years ago. Joe and Kaylee, when President Biden greeted President-elect Trump on the North Portico behind my shoulder, he said, quote, "Welcome home."
We've just seen inside the rotunda Mike Pence, the former vice president, of course, of the first Trump administration, entering alone. He is not accompanied by his wife, Karen Pence, today, it seems. Tyler, as we consider that just moments from now we will be seeing the president, current President Joe Biden, as well as Donald Trump, who is about to become president, walking into the rotunda, and we're hearing the music fill the chamber for their arrival here. What is... Well, let's listen into this if we can.
States, the Honorable William J. Clinton, accompanied by the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton.
So, of course, we do expect, Joe, all living presidents to be in attendance today, as they were here in Washington earlier this month for the state funeral of former President Jimmy Carter. So after Bill Clinton, of course, we expect the Bushes to arrive. Barack Obama will be solo as well. Michelle Obama will not be in attendance. And then, of course, Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
As we wait for Donald Trump to arrive, considering the political history between Trump and Hillary Clinton as well, who was just introduced along with the former president. Pretty remarkable to consider the journey they have been on. This is special live coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush, accompanied by
the Bushes are now making their way into the rotunda. Kaylee, they'll all be seated, of course, once Donald Trump arrives. And this ceremony will kick off the process that will include J.D. Vance's swearing in about 20 minutes from now. And, of course, per order of the Constitution, Donald Trump swearing in at high noon.
Yep, that's exactly right. So we just have about 45 minutes to go, where it will still be the 46th president of the United States, Joe Biden, acting as commander-in-chief, handing the reins over to Donald Trump, as we saw Barack Obama do back in 2017, 8 years ago today. And it is former President Obama that we expect to see next here.
Going stag, as you mentioned, Kaylee. Michelle Obama choosing not to attend the ceremonies here today.
Ladies and gentlemen,
well, look at this room full of faces.
Of the United States, the Honorable Barack H. Obama.
course, it will just be Joe Biden and Donald Trump that we are waiting to enter the rotunda. And as we do so, we want to bring in to our special coverage here on Bloomberg TV and radio, Ashley Davis, Republican strategist, partner with S3 Group, and former senior staffer with the Department of Homeland Security. You have had a hand, Ashley, in organizing inaugurations in the past. Obviously, this one was disrupted by the frigid weather today. That's why we are seeing all of these most senior people who have held or do hold positions in U.S. government inside today. As John Roberts, the Chief Justice, is entering now. All seems to be going to plan so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually like that this smaller venue inside the rotunda. It kind of seems cozy, and I'm, of course, laughing at my former boss. He's like trying not to giggle like he's in third grade, President Bush, you know, poking at President Obama. But I actually experienced this a little bit differently. I was part of the staff that was back at the White House during this time in 2000 when they changed from Clinton to Bush, and we were literally taking the furniture from President Clinton out of the Oval Office and putting in the temporary furniture for George W. Bush. And so it was very, very interesting. We were back behind the scenes trying to make sure that the furniture in the Oval Office was complete by the time that the president was done with the parade. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes things happening right now.
You don't have a lot of time to work with either, do you? You're
really
moving a family. You're moving two families in an hour and a half's time, essentially. And I'm sure you can describe to our audience, there are about 100 people who work at the White House, no matter who the president is. Those who have taken care of this family. And in the case of today, they know the family moving in. This learning process won't be there quite the same way it usually is.
Absolutely. And I will have to say the most important people that are in the White House are the career people that stay there year after year, administration after administration. I remember when we came in, they pretty much like touched us on the hand and be like, yeah, you were like the seventh, administration that we've been working. But they're really the ones that literally, at the direction of the political staff, really changing around. I mean, when I went in, of course, it was when all the W's were missing on the keyboards, remember? Thanks. So I did experience that, but it truly is the career staff are the most important people that run this country.
Well, we're seeing now entering the rotunda, the First Lady, Jill Biden, accompanied by Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman of the United States. We should shortly see following them Melania Trump and Usha Vance as we are getting here closer and closer to the arrival of President-elect Donald Trump as his children now are entering the rotunda. Ashley, just considering that it was 8 years ago, one president removed, that we were seeing Donald Trump sworn into office the first time. Of course, that one was outdoors, unlike the ceremonies taking place today. But how different is the country he's inheriting now, and the political environment he's walking into? How different is it from 2017 to now in 2025?
Well, in 2017, remember, everyone was so angry that he won. No one was really expecting him to win. There were the major protests that were happening. His back was still up. He was still fighting. And so I think his tone, from what I understand, is going to be very different today in regards to his speech. But also, there's no way 8 years ago that you would see Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and everyone else there. I mean, you were almost shamed if you were a Donald Trump person. So there was always this constant battle. And I think that the one positive part of, and I'm looking at Barron Trump right now, who is so tall, the one thing that really changed this time is because the election was very definitive, the country doesn't seem as angry, even if people do not like Donald Trump or some of the rhetoric. People aren't. You're embracing the presidency, and this is how it was. Listen, when we won, remember, we had the hanging chads, and the Supreme Court decided our election. So that was very contentious as well, but Bill Clinton did stand up and do what he was supposed to do. So I think that this is, for the world to watch this transfer of power and the excitement around it, whether it's with the tech and whether some people are still holding their nose, this is what the strength of America is a clear transfer of power that's peaceful.
course, when you say we won, you're referring to the Bush administration.
Yeah.
You ever think you'd see George W. Bush sharing space with Dana White? This is the type of socializing that is happening inside the Capitol Rotunda right now. I'm compelled by the mechanics that you were describing.
I mean, Bush is
maybe
like,
they know each other.
Yeah. No, that doesn't surprise me.
There's a moving truck, or I guess a bunch of them, in the driveway between the West Wing and the Executive Office building right now. What is happening inside the residence? What's going on inside the mansion?
A lot of that, the personal items have been taken out. Obviously, they don't take furniture out. They don't take the Lincoln bedroom furniture. So that all stays. It's really their personal belongings. That's been moving out for a long time. But it really is the traditional nuts and bolts of what's running the actual political side of things that they're moving out today in regards to the office space and things like that. But I would say that they probably, since over the last month, they've been moving their normal stuff out. But the
ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Biden and Mr.
Donald Trump stuff won't be coming in until 12:01 today. So,
well, and when we consider how quickly things will need to be moved, Donald Trump, after taking the oath within the next 40 minutes here, will be moving very quickly as well to issue what we understand to be potentially north of 100 executive orders. Ashley, just talk about how unprecedented it is to see an executive come into power and on day one take that much action.
Well, for him and what he's been saying, it's not unusual. I'm not surprised. I've heard actually up to maybe 200 executive orders in regards to energy immigration. We've all heard this in regards to different things within the federal government. But he will do a lot like all of them have done in recent history that I know of, that they'll sit at the desk right after he's sworn in and do executive orders. I think that President Trump's will be a little bit more controversial. You'll see, we've all heard about the some of the the executive orders that he's supposed to be doing in regards to the federal government. So I think that, and Joe and I were talking about this earlier, supposedly he's going to do some more throughout the day that are probably a little bit more red meat and controversial that he's promised. Or,
right on stage at the Capital One Arena, we're told Kaylee is going to set up a desk there to continue signing. I guess there are enough to go around. We're watching, by the way, the First Lady, Jill Biden, in her final moments as First Lady, entering the rotunda with Doug Emhoff. And we're still joined by Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributor, our Democratic analyst, political science professor at Iona University. The interview that Jill Biden gave just a couple of days ago, talking about her relationship or lack thereof with Nancy Pelosi, raised a lot of eyebrows. And she has been framed as more bitter than sweet in her time leaving the executive. What do you think, looking at her now? What's going through her mind?
Yeah, and there was that really tough comment by Nancy Pelosi's daughter describing her as, essentially Lady what did she say? Lady McBride or something? Lady McBiden, I should say.
Lady McBiden.
And, put on your big girl pants and you worry about your husband's legacy. Democrats are frustrated. There is no question. Joe Biden was elected so that he would put an end to the Trump dynasty, Trump's legacy, and he wasn't able to do that. And then you've got Joe Biden coming out after the election saying he thinks he could have beat Donald Trump. Very, very tough. A lot of blame is going around. I mean, listening to somebody like James Carville, who said this should be a triumphant day for Joe Biden leaving, and yet, all to his own doing, he is leaving under this cloud of infighting amongst Democrats, and a legacy that's tarnished in a way it shouldn't be. So it is a very tough time for Joe Biden, Jill Biden, in part because this was somebody who said he was going to be a one-term president. He should have left on a high note, said he was not going to run again after the midterm of 2022, said he was going to run at that age and couldn't get over the goalpost and had to step aside. So very, very tough for Democrats, and I'm sure tough for the First Lady.
Well, and of course, in making the decision ultimately to end his re-election campaign, Joe Biden made himself a lame duck this summer in those final months of his presidency, was with the knowledge that it would come to an end. And on that note, Ashley, while you're with us, Donald Trump is about to take the oath of office knowing that he is entering a lame duck. He cannot seek re-election after the next one.
That's what I was going to say when you were saying what's he going to do, like all these unheard of executive orders. But really, in my opinion, he is 18 months. So you have 2 years before a lot of times the House will flip or a body will flip after 2 years. So leading up to the election, you really only have 18 months. So I feel that he has 18 months to get everything he wants to do without opposition, whether it's Democrats controlling the House at that point, or just election season. Everyone knows how things shut down towards the end. So I think he's going to do everything possible. And then you hit the lame duck status probably after the midterms. And so, he'll continue to do whatever he's able to do from an executive position, but not from a congressional position.
It makes a lot more sense than the arbitrary 100 days, right, as we consider the midterms as a marker here. We just saw a shot of all of the former speakers of the House still living: Gingrich, Boehner, McCarthy. We get closer to the sun here with Mike Johnson and what must be going through his mind today as we not only prepare for the flurry of EOs, but a scramble to write a massive reconciliation bill that's already underway.
Yeah, that's right. So many challenges on the plate of Donald Trump, on the Republicans in the House and the Senate. I think one of the big lessons Donald Trump could learn from Joe Biden, if he chooses to look at it that way, would be don't overread your mandate. And in the last 48 hours alone, we have heard Donald Trump at the rally last night and elsewhere, and it sounds to me like an overreading of the mandate. That's what Joe Biden did. And when you get beyond the American public, as Ashley was just talking about, we have a midterm coming up at when there may be a pushback. In the very short term, they have an awful lot on their agenda to try to push through with only one vote to, really only one vote margin in the House. We heard Mike Johnson out on the Sunday talk shows this weekend, and he sounds very, very positive and upbeat, but he knows how difficult it is going to be to thread this needle as they go forward.
Jeannie Shanzano and Ashley Davis will be with us as we stand by for Donald Trump to join the crowd inside the U.S. Rotunda. Things may be sliding a bit. If you're just joining us, this is special live coverage on Bloomberg TV and radio, the inauguration of Donald Trump. And we want to bring you back to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue right now. Joining us from the White House, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Tyler, we were talking about the actual moving process, the physical transition that's taking place in the mansion. How busy are things over there?
Well, we have seen, I know that you mentioned seeing some of those moving trucks already start to come in on the White House North Lawn. But for now, it's relatively calm here. But when we look ahead to what could be on President Biden's outgoing schedule as he completes these final hours as president, we are expecting him to have his own send-off ceremony at Joint Base Andrews after he departs the Capitol. And that is where we will likely hear him for a speech from him for the first time as a former president. And you were just discussing this with Jeannie, this idea that President Biden is leaving office with relatively lower approval ratings. According to Gallup, one of the metrics that we trust, he has a 39% approval rating. That is down 18 percentage points from when he took office 4 years ago. However, as you both know, he gave that farewell address to the nation last week where he said that he thinks history will remember his presidency kinder than that, saying that it might take time for his policies to, quote, bloom for decades to come. He noted some of his key legislative agreements and economic investments, including the CHIPS and Science Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Well, and before leaving office, he added one more thing to the list of things he did as president, Tyler, which was issuing preemptive pardons to a handful of people, including those who served on the January 6th Select Committee. What has the reception been like to that, though it was largely expected?
Right, largely expected. President Biden saying that he was mulling this decision, issuing them for members like Dr. Anthony Fauci, as well as General Mark Milley, the former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and those members of the Congressional January 6th Committee who were investigating allegations that Trump tried to subvert the 2020 election results. Now, while General Milley has thanked President Biden for his pardon, other members, including on the January 6th Committee, said that they actually didn't want a pardon because they don't think that there was anything that they need to be pardoned for. Kaylee and Joe, important to note that last week during her confirmation hearing, Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi was asked about whether or not she would politicize the Department of Justice, and she said that she would not. However, she did not rule out going after specific political opponents of President-elect Trump, saying that she would have to review the cases on a fact and case-by-case basis.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall at the White House for us. Thank you so much, Tyler. We'll check back in with you frequently over the next few hours of our special coverage. I would point out to our audiences here on Bloomberg TV and radio, we just see the incoming First Lady, Melania Trump, making her way into the Capitol. We'll see her enter the rotunda surely in a few minutes here. It does seem, though, Joe, that things are running slightly behind schedule today. Yeah,
we did have a plan to see J.D. Vance sworn in roughly 5 minutes from now. I suppose things could accelerate, but that's the floater. Donald Trump has to be sworn in at high noon per order of the Constitution, so we'll do our best to work with the next 30 minutes here. Most everyone has arrived, though, and if you're just joining us as part of our special coverage, we're looking at a U.S. rotunda that is a who's who of high tech and politics.
Senator Christopher D. Macchio.
We're going to now have part of the musical component of this ceremony. There'll be several moments of music between the stages of the ceremony, of course, including the swearing-in.
And while those gathered in the rotunda enjoy this music, we want to go now to the Cannon Rotunda, where we find Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern live on Capitol Hill. So, Anne-Marie, the fact that he is performing for a much smaller audience than initially intended, a room that we understand fits only about 600 people compared to the west front of the Capitol and the vast landscape of the National Mall that would have been full with thousands of guests potentially had this remained outdoors.
Absolutely. It was almost very difficult if you were invited to the main event to get then invited to the smaller event inside the rotunda when they decided to move this indoors due to the weather. You have that tenor singing there who's been almost a constant when it comes to President-elect Donald Trump on the campaign trail. He performed as well for all of his supporters at the RNC. He's an individual that Trump does like to take on the road, so really no surprise that he is here on the day he will be inaugurated. As we see these scenes come in, Kaylee, and you're talking about the fact that it's just going to be less people because it was moved indoors. It's quite stunning and shocking about who is actually there in these photos that will be behind President Trump when he is sworn in. Of course, it's members of his cabinet, like soon-to-be Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the soon-to-be Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent standing next to each other. But then they're mixed in with business leaders, and not just the likes of Elon Musk, who's also been really joined at the hip with President-elect Trump on the campaign trail, but Sundar Pichai is here. We also have Tim Cook here, who Donald Trump talked about last night, saying that they spoke and that he's going to make a massive investment into the United States following his election win. On top of that, we have Mark Zuckerberg, an individual who's been going in and out of Mar-a-Lago not just once since the election, individual who's moving his company a little bit more to the right, you can say, with the likes of Dana White being added to his board and Jeff Kaplan taking over, a staunch Republican here in Washington, D.C. since the Bush days, taking over global policy at Meta. And then finally, an individual that you might not know of, Bernard Arnault, one of the richest men in Europe, a luxury titan, the CEO of LVMH, is also in attendance today. So it's a very interesting mix of individuals that are here. And then I will just say from the foreign policy perspective, most notably, Giorgia Meloni, the single only Western leader who decided to come herself and not send her ambassador.
Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. We'll get back with you, of course, throughout the day here as we reassemble our signature panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us at the desk here in Washington as we walk up on the swearings-in of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. J.D. Vance, we just saw entering the Capitol and will soon join the others in the rotunda. We also saw Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Hakeem Jeffries approaching the queue, if you will, as they will then be introduced formally here. Jeannie, Kamala Harris, not a smile as she was walking in. We've already seen Doug Emhoff and Jill Biden. She seems to be sharing a similar mood.
That's right. It is a tough day for Kamala Harris in particular, obviously Joe Biden and the First Lady. You know, Kamala Harris felt like she came into this campaign, had 100 days. She raised more money than I think anybody could have expected. She brought a lot of energy. We were all at the Democratic National Convention. There were a lot of supporters there. She came close popular vote-wise, but didn't come close in the Electoral College. So this is very bittersweet for Vice President Harris. And then, of course, she is being dogged in the last few weeks and days by President Biden saying, had he been on the top of the ticket, he could have won. So a very divisive time for Democrats who are trying to figure out what their next step is going to be. And, of course, you mentioned Hakeem Jeffries, now the leader, really, of the Democratic Party, and Chuck Schumer, to see where they can move this now opposition party.
Well, and as you talk, Jeannie, about Kamala Harris coming close in the popular vote, she did not win the popular vote. Donald Trump did. He is about to take the oath of office. As we see him entering the Capitol now, he will, of course, be formally introduced in the rotunda in just a few moments as he gets ready to be the second president in history to be inaugurated a second time, but with a gap in between. And, Rick, when we consider the 77 million people who sent him once again to this highest office in the country, he says he's taking office today with a mandate. To what extent is that really true?
Yeah, I think that it's as true as he can actually make it stick in Congress, right? I mean, you know, obviously he's got a lot of energy that came out of that election. It was not expected by a lot of pundits to have the overwhelming victory in winning both the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and the popular vote, as you mentioned. And so I think that, you know, he's going to test the limits, right? And he's going to try to do things by executive order that may ultimately need confirmation and action by Congress, and we'll see whether or not he's able to assemble enough votes to do that. The reality of it is that you know, a lot of these things like the TikTok extension for 90 days. I mean, like, he's actually using an executive order to manage a law. And, you know, a lot of people are scratching their head going, like, how's that going to work out?
Might get tied up in court.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what we're going to see is a big push out early to take advantage of that mandate and then see where the chips fall.
Our shot now fixed on the incoming First Lady, Ivanka Trump, and her bolero hat, which, I'm sorry, Melania Trump. Thank you, Kaylee. Her hat seems to be the talk as much as anything so far. Interesting, as we saw Donald Trump making his way into the Capitol as well. Not a red tie today. He's in bipartisan purple. I don't think we've ever seen that before. The leadership from Capitol Hill walking in the room. Isn't that the trademark, the red tie and the, I don't know, I thought that was
There isn't that much red in the rotunda.
There really isn't,
frankly,
as a
at
matter
all.
of fact. And don't see any MAGA hats there either. Hail to the chief. Now hearing live in the U.S. Rotunda as we stand by for the introduction of President-elect Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden, Jr., and Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Kamala Devi Harris.
Of course, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, he is with Kamala Harris. As I mentioned, President-elect Trump will have his introduction coming up next.
Well, and incredible as we consider Kamala Harris not just as the vice president for the next few moments, but as the person who lost to Trump in the 2024 election, yet in attendance at this inaugural ceremony, unlike what we saw in 2020, where Donald Trump did not attend Joe Biden's inauguration. They have made much hay about sticking with this transfer of power.
That's true.
And despite what I'm sure is a bit of distaste on both sides, they are all in attendance today as Donald Trump prepares to walk into the rotunda.
President-elect, the Executive Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Mr. Michael Wagner, Senate Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, Jason Bell, and House Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms, Mr. Sean Keating. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, the Honorable J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance will be sworn in first in what is a slightly longer oath than the president will take. As written in the Constitution, Justice Brett Kavanaugh will administer the oath for J.D. Vance. And to your point, Kaylee, we are a bit late on the schedule here, so they need to accelerate this a bit once everyone is in the room.
Yep, we just have 20 minutes to go until noon when the Constitution dictates the presidential oath of office must be administered. That will be done by Chief Justice John Roberts, and Donald Trump, of course, will put his hand on the Bible and take the oath. We have just gotten news, though, as we await Donald Trump's arrival to the rotunda, that there have been more pardons issued by President Biden as he's getting ready to leave the office, including for his brother, James Biden, Sarah Biden, and others.
He writes, "My family has been subjected to unrelenting attacks and threats motivated solely by a desire to hurt me. The worst kind of partisan politics. Unfortunately, I have no reason to believe those attacks will end." This is quite a parting statement from the president here as we wait for the transition of power.
One also issued to his sister, Valerie Biden Owens, after we saw, of course, members of the January 6th committee, General Mark Milley and Dr. Anthony Fauci, preemptively pardoned earlier. And we are about to see now those who will be escorting President-elect Trump enter the rotunda, shortly followed by the man who was about to become the 47th president of the United States.
Senate leadership and House leadership joining us now as we see John Thune, Hakeem Jeffries, and there's the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, aforementioned Kaylee.
The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, House Majority Leader.
And Senator Amy Klobuchar, who, of course, in her role as chairwoman of the Congressional Inaugural Committee, will be playing a part in the proceedings about to take place today.
It's 24 degrees in Washington, D.C. It feels like 12. If we were outdoors at this stage, Kaylee, people who have been outside for many hours on a very cold and shadowy Capitol front, that is probably for the best that we were not enduring that today. We also got some snow last night just to keep things interesting. Fortress Washington is in place, though. The number of streets closed, the number of police, Secret Service, and National Guard troops. You don't have to walk too far to see a Humvee in downtown Washington today. All
of it to guarantee the security of this event, a pillar of American democracy, the inauguration of a president. That person, of course, about to be Donald J. Trump, who will enter this rotunda momentarily.
Of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
There we have it. Entering the rotunda to a handshake with Kristi Noem. Donald Trump now greeted by the incoming First Lady with a bit of a kiss.
And shaking the hand of his predecessor,
that's right,
Joe Biden. Warm reception in the rotunda, though of course not quite the same scale of reception he may have received had he been walking out to the west front of the Capitol and looking out on the supporters who intended to gather today on the National Mall.
A slightly different vista, although this will be one that goes down in the history books, obviously in a unique setting and the first time we've seen this since Ronald Reagan in 1985. A round of applause from those in the room. This is live from the U.S. Capitol on Bloomberg TV and radio. Over the next 15 minutes or so, Kaylee, we will see both of these men sworn into office.
Indeed, with those oaths administered by justices of the Supreme Court, and we're seeing now a live shot of Emancipation Hall, which is, if you will, the secondary viewing area inside the Capitol premises today, where those who were not fortunate enough to be among the 600 seated inside the rotunda are gathering to watch the swearing in. And that is actually the location where Donald Trump is expected to give his inaugural address.
That's right. The program is getting underway now. That we have a quorum. Donald Trump taking his seat right next to J.D. Vance in a much warmer room than we would have had otherwise.
Well, that's absolutely true. And the same goes for those of us here in our Washington, D.C. studio. It is not just me and Joe, but Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, our signature political panel, are still with us. Jeannie, as we await the oaths to actually be administered, we consider that shortly thereafter, we will see the first real action taken by Donald Trump as the 47th president. He is going to move much quicker than he did after the first time, with potentially more north of 100 100 executive orders as Amy Klobuchar prepares to deliver her remarks and call things to order here. Just walk us through the scale of what we should brace for within the next 6 to 7 hours.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly wants to be the president known for having the most executive orders issued in that first 24-hour period. Kaylee, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to the Capital One Arena with a big check, you know, like they give you, and he signs in an executive order there because he really does want this to be the biggest. They're falling into really 3 buckets: the federal government workers, energy, and immigration. We may also see, and Rick was talking about this, something on TikTok. We could even see a renaming of the Gulf of Mexico. But the big 3 are going to be immigration, energy, and the federal workforce. And we even heard the new incoming border czar saying, don't be surprised if you see raids in big cities in the next day or 2, including Chicago, New York, and others. And I would just say, we saw a New York Times poll the other day. It was astonishing. 87% of Americans support the deportation of illegal immigrants convicted of a crime. So he has a mandate on that. Where he may not have a mandate is illegal immigrants who haven't been convicted of a crime. And that's where he's going to have to be careful about that overreach. And another bucket there would be the January 6th convicts. And he mentioned last night he will be taking action on them shortly as well.
So what should we expect in terms of political shock and awe here in the first 24 hours? Donald Trump clearly wants to have the optics of making things happen.
That's right. He campaigned on this every day. There wasn't a rally that we didn't hear about, like, what was he going to do day one, right? And remember, he did remind us he's going to be a dictator for one day, the first day in office. And so whether this amounts to dictatorship or just a lot of executive orders, but he'll go from this speech becoming president of the United States into the presidential holding room there in the Capitol and sign some of these executive orders only seconds after he's actually made president. And then he'll go to the rally at Capital One, and when he gets to the White House, they'll have another load of executive orders. And look, I do think it's important for people to understand that all these executive orders will probably fall into certain, sort of law rubrics. And that means, like, he'll sign an Aliens Act, which allows him to do the things that Jeannie just talked about doing on the border. He may declare an economic emergency that allows him to transfer federal funds between different departments and agencies without getting congressional approval. So these are things that are on the books that are eligible for the President of the United States to do that then will unleash a torrent of these other executive orders, not just today, not just tomorrow, but for the balance of his presidency.
Well, and when we consider his presidency and the person who will take his oath just before Donald Trump does, J.D. Vance, what role will he play as part of the executive branch, Rick, in all of this?
Well, he is, I think, the youngest vice president to enter office, 40 years old. He is the generational shift for the MAGA movement, and he is connected to the torrent of crypto bros and technology executives that make up a good portion of the people sitting behind Donald Trump today. And when you look at the kind of economic power that they could unleash, Tim Cook alone talking about bringing manufacturing from China to the United States for iPhones. I mean, these could be hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, and I think you'll see his continued effort to solidify their involvement in the Trump administration, but also he's kind of a ideological steward of the MAGA movement. And so you'll see him in every debate, whether it's related to foreign policy, the military, national security, or economics, where he'll be the one in the room being basically the stalwart MAGA ideologue.
Following the swearings in, we're going to be hearing an inaugural address. Jeannie, we expect probably something in the area of 20 minutes. That's what we do here. Of course, the original one was 135 words long. I don't know that it would behoove Donald Trump to speak in such brevity, but what are you hoping to hear as the Democrat at the table today?
135 words. Those were the days.
Yeah.
And then there was William Henry Harrison, 90 minutes.
That's right.
Of course, the speech killed him because he got pneumonia. He did it outside and died after. So thank goodness Donald Trump is inside. He is talking about a more unified focus in his strength, unity. But, for Democrats, they're really saying, well, how do you define that? How do you define strength? How do you define unity? How do you define freedom? And so I think it's going to be a really precursor precursor, as will the EOs that, as Rick mentioned, he's going to go right away and start signing, as to what to expect over the next 4 years, but particularly for a lame duck president, the next 18 months. And what is the extent of the authority that the executive branch has? One of the problems in American history is we have presidents that don't have a lot of power beyond, as Richard Newsat told us, the power of persuasion, which Donald Trump does very well. And so if he is able to take in and exercise more of this power, what kind of challenge does that bring to Congress? And I think it's fascinating with the TikTok 90-day extension. We heard people like Tom Cotton say, hey, wait a minute, that is beyond the scope of the law passed by the Congress and signed by the president. So we're going to see some real tension between executive authority and the legislature, even though it is a Republican legislature that tends to support Donald Trump. So there's a lot to listen for in this speech. But his first one was, what, 15 minutes? So I don't know if he's gotten, if he's going to go longer in his older age or not.
Well, assuming he sticks to the script.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and if his acceptance speech of the Republican nomination back in July is any indication, it could go on for quite some time. I would note Senator Amy Klobuchar did wrap up her remarks, and now Senator Deb Fischer, the Republican from Nebraska, is speaking. We are getting closer to the actual swearing in of J.D. Vance as vice president, but let's listen briefly to Senator Fischer's remarks.
And the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the American people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many, many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure. And now, allow me to welcome Archbishop Timothy Dolan and Reverend Franklin Graham, who will deliver our invocation. Please rise.
Be still and know that I am God, supreme among the nations, supreme on the earth. Let us pray. Remembering General George Washington on his knees at Valley Forge, recalling Abraham Lincoln at his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Remembering General George Patton's instructions to his soldiers as they began the Battle of the Bulge 8 decades ago: pray. Pray when fighting, pray alone, pray with others, pray by night, pray by day. Observing the birthday of the Reverend Martin Luther King, who warned, without God, our efforts turn to ashes. We, blessed citizens of this one nation under God, humbled by our claim that in God we trust, gather indeed this Inauguration Day to pray for our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president, for the large blessings upon Joseph Biden, for our men and women in uniform, for each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this Inauguration Day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand in oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance. God of our fathers, in your wisdom you set man to govern your creatures, to govern in holiness and justice, to render justice with integrity. Give our leader wisdom, for he is your servant, aware of his own weakness and brevity of life. If wisdom which comes not from you be not with him, he shall be held in no esteem. Send wisdom from heavens that she may be with him, that he may know your designs. Please, God, bless America. Please, mend her every flaw. You are the God in whom we trust, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Mr. President, the last 4 years, there are times I'm sure you thought it was pretty dark. But look what God has done. We praise him and give him glory. Let us pray. Our Father and our God, thou hast said, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. As the prophet Daniel prayed, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings. He raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Our Father, today, as President Donald J. Trump takes the oath of office once again, we come to say thank you, O Lord our God. Father, when Donald Trump's enemies thought he was down and out, you and you alone saved his life and raised him up with strength and power by your mighty hand. We pray for President Trump that you'll watch over, protect, guide, direct him. Give him your wisdom from your throne on high. We ask that you would bless him and that our nation would be blessed through him. We also ask that you would bless and protect Melania as First Lady. We thank you for the beauty, the warmth, and grace that she shows not only to this nation, but to the whole world. We thank you for Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and his wife Usha and their young family. May he be a strength to President Trump, to stand beside him, to hold up his arms like Aaron held up the arms of Moses in the midst of battle. The prophet Samuel reminded the people, it was you that brought them up from the land of Egypt. And he said, now stand still, that I may reason with you before the Lord. So, Father, we take this moment to stand still, to remember the great things that you have done for this nation. Thank you for the protection, the bounty, the freedoms that we so enjoy. We remember to keep our eyes fixed on you, and may our hearts be inclined to your voice. We know that America can never be great again if we turn our backs on you. We ask for your help, and we pray all of this in the name of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, your Son, my Savior, and our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
the prayer delivered by Franklin Graham, the president of humanitarian aid organization Samaritan's Purse. He spoke after the Archbishop of New York, Timothy Dolan. And now we will, of course, see in just moments the swearing in of J.D. Vance as vice president.
His family joining him before the podium here on the staging that has been set up in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Kaylee, this is obviously the height of J.D. Vance's political career, one that advanced so quickly from the Senate through Donald Trump's selection as his running mate. This is live on Bloomberg. Justice Brett Kavanaugh again will be administering the oath.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Please welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the presidential oath of office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Donald Trump.
Now President Trump, Kaylee.
Indeed, sworn in as the 47th President of the United States just moments after J.D. Vance was sworn in as Vice President. And, of course, the cannons now going off outside the Capitol in celebration.
Yeah, live look outside the U.S. Capitol in snowy Washington, back inside the rotunda now with a smiling Don Jr. giving his dad a hug, once again sworn in as the President of the United States. His children, Eric and Ivanka, are with him as well. And, of course, this is a big day for J.D. Vance, having just heard his swearing in. Barron Trump is there as well. We're going to start preparing for an inaugural address now, Kaylee, that will come from Donald Trump.
And it is expected that he will move from the rotunda where he has just taken the oath of office to Emancipation Hall elsewhere in the Capitol to deliver that address. All of these proceedings, of course, having been changed by the frigid weather in Washington, which is why for the first time since 1985, Donald Trump took that oath from inside the Capitol rather than from the outside of it. And, of course, after the proceedings inside the Capitol building are done early this afternoon, he will be making his way to Capital One Arena to join supporters who have gathered there to watch these ceremonies today.
Yeah, he's got a long day ahead. This is really just the beginning of it, a day that began at the White House with the Bidens. Donald Trump will make his way to the Capital One Arena after a grand luncheon with lawmakers. And Kaylee, it appears, based on our reporting, he's going to be signing executive orders along the way. Some here in the Capitol, more at the arena, and then potentially more when he gets back to the White House at the end of this day.
And now the Naval Academy Glee Club singing Battle Hymn of the Republic after Donald Trump was sworn in. Of course, there was intending to be more music in these ceremonies today, but with the behind the schedule nature of today's events, it does seem that a few of those musical numbers have been lost in the program.
That's for sure. As we stand by for Donald Trump's speech, we reassemble our signature panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. The oath, of course, is the most important part of the day here, Rick, but the inaugural address is one that will endure for the ages. What will we hear next from Donald Trump?
Well, I think he will dispatch his swift sword in this inaugural address and slay some demons that he believes keeps America from being great again. And yet, I think this idea of piecing together strength and prosperity will be the centerpiece of his speech, and I think that has been pretty much the centerpiece of his campaign. So we're going to hear a lot of what we've heard before in the run-up to this presidential address.
Well, and when we considered the fact that Donald Trump is now standing just across the aisle, literally, Jeannie, from the man who is now a former president, Joe Biden no longer claims the title as commander-in-chief. Donald Trump officially, as of a few moments ago, has taken that over. How sharp a contrast will we see drawn between the last 4 Biden years and the 4 years we are about to experience under Donald Trump?
It's going to be stark. I mean, the number one promise Donald Trump made on the campaign trail was to reverse much of what the Biden administration did, and he will work as hard as he can to do that as swiftly as he can. And I would also just add, what a historic moment Americans have lived through for the last, not just 4, but 8 years, with Donald Trump coming in quite unexpectedly in the cooler reception he got, and then losing his reelection to a president who said he was going to end Trumpism forever, and many Republicans after January 2021 believing that Donald Trump could never make a comeback. And he defeated all those odds. 4 major court cases, popular vote winner, a vice president who was particularly popular on the Democratic side and raised $1 billion. He came back from that all to be only the second non-consecutive president after Grover Cleveland to win, and then to be taking this oath today. I mean, it is such a remarkable comeback. It really makes Richard Nixon's comeback look like it wasn't much of a second. But sorry to Richard Nixon. But what a moment Americans have lived through. So, you know, it's hard to just sort of for, I think, historians and all of us, it's hard to really put this all into perspective and what it means. And to your point, your initial point, Kayleigh, the shift in policy we will see will be dramatic, at least as dramatic as Donald Trump is allowed to make it and legally allowed to keep any of those EOs in place and to move this Congress forward.
All right, Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis, our signature political panel, are sticking with us, but we want to check back in now with our reporter live at the White House, where we find Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. So, Tyler, as Jeannie is alluding to, we are expecting shortly after these ceremonies at the Capitol wrap up, Donald Trump to sign a whole host of executive orders.
Right, Kayleigh, we still have that Oval Office signing ceremony on the schedule as we expect him to make his way back here later this afternoon. We know that he's planning to focus on 3 big areas, addressing the federal workforce, but as well as immigration and energy policy, those 2 former issues, something that he's also asked Congress to prioritize to tackle. Now, something that we are watching, though, is what we're not expecting him to sign today. Bloomberg News reporting that we should not expect China-specific tariffs. A source familiar telling Bloomberg News that shows Donald Trump's willingness to engage with China when it comes to negotiations instead of going straight to tariffs. We know that President-elect Trump, or now I have to get used to saying President Trump, did engage with Chinese President Xi Jinping last week for a phone call, and in a post on Truth Social, he said that the 2 of them did talk about this idea of rebalancing trade. Now, Bloomberg News had previously reported that Trump's economic team was considering a perhaps more gradual approach to tariffs, 2 to 5% per month, but that no firm deals had been in place. But it's interesting, Joe and Kayleigh, because tariffs have been such a big focal point of Trump's economic plans, but it's also something that hasn't gotten 100% support from congressional Republicans. We heard it come up time and time again during Scott Bessent's nomination hearing on Capitol Hill last week. I was there, and I actually spoke with one senator who questioned Bessent about any potential inflationary impacts. That was Senator Todd Young, a Republican from Indiana, who represents farmer interests, who said that he had constituents who were concerned about what potential tariffs could mean for inflation and also their bottom line. And I spoke to him afterwards, and he told me that in private meetings with transition officials, they said to expect more selective tariffs. So it's clear that they're trying to address it this way going forward.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall at the White House, standing by for Donald Trump, who is now approaching the podium in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda to deliver what is his second inaugural address. Let's listen live on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country. Sunlight is pouring over the entire world. And America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer.
That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural. And very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states. And the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. national unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country, we will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. Illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before. To restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government, my administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
An inaugural address, about 30 minutes in length, delivered by the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, given inside the Capitol Rotunda, where he took, just about 35 minutes ago, the oath of office. Donald Trump, in this speech, saying he will declare a national energy emergency, a national emergency at the southern border. He will begin an overhaul of trade systems in order to protect Americans, and also touching on what he will describe as an expansion of American territory, saying the U.S. will once again consider itself a growing nation. Really a laundry list of what he intends to do, potentially starting just within the next few hours, Joe, as President of the United States once again.
That's right. Carrie Underwood being introduced now to sing America the Beautiful as part of this entire ceremony, Kaylee, that was running late, so we're going to make up for a couple of things that might have taken place before noon. The golden age of America begins right now, Donald Trump said. This is Liberation Day for American citizens. Interesting to watch. He stuck to the teleprompter pretty closely there in what seemed like actually a speech he wasn't terribly familiar with at some points, although he did include most of the greatest hits and most of the promises made on the campaign trail. As we have eyes here on the rotunda, the former presidents watching this address delivered here, Kaylee, that was supposed to be outdoors. We know that Donald Trump will soon begin signing executive orders, some of which you just described, before he even leaves this building.
Well, and as you discussed the former presidents, all five of which are here in the Capitol Rotunda alongside Donald Trump, there was only one moment in this address when any of them stood in response to his words, and that was when he was referencing the now-in-place ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas and the return of hostages that has begun. And that was the one visibly bipartisan moment in this speech, which, again, was just about 30 minutes in length. And we want to get reaction now from our signature political panel, who was listening to it in its entirety. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. Rick, just to begin with you, obviously this was longer than the first inaugural address given by Donald Trump back in 2017 and introduced a lot of ideas we were already familiar with here. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, really, no surprises. I think that he used a device that was important to him on the campaign trail throughout the year, and he employed it here, and that was he had to create a little bit darkness for him to bring in the light. And so even though he declared America's decline is over as of now, right? And I don't think there's anybody who would probably claim that America is a country in decline, but he needs that device in order to say, now we're entering the golden age. And I think that the things that he talked about were pretty much what we've heard. But I think the one thing which is particularly interesting is this notion where our territorial borders aren't set. That he talked about manifest destiny. You know, the 1850s, you know, America looked to the west and create new lands. And he didn't say Greenland, but it sure sounded like there was some Greenland and Canada and other things like that. But then he said space, and that we are going to actually, you know, be space travelers. And of course, you saw Elon Musk giving it the thumbs up, you know, in the crowd. So I think this is a pretty expansive agenda beyond the things that typically we heard of. This idea that somehow America is going to expand its territory, especially as it relates to the Panama Canal. He made a pretty declarative statement that that's ours and we're taking it back.
We're taking it back. That was a remarkable moment as well, referring to the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. We heard that was coming as well from Donald Trump himself. But Jeannie Shanzano, he talked about his recent election as a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal. He said this with Joe Biden sitting about 4 feet away from him. He referred to the attempts to save, to take his life, and said, "I was saved by God to make America great again." This is new level Trump from the first address.
It's absolutely new from the first address, more reminiscent of his speech at the Republican National Convention, of course, just a few days after he was a victim of the first attempt on his life. A stunning moment. And, you know, I thought it was almost two speeches in one we were hearing from Donald Trump today. There was the more monotone, sort of sedate delivery that he had. Then there was the red meat for the base, which was a reiteration of so many promises he's made on the campaign trail. And, you know, you mentioned the Panama Canal. You mentioned the Gulf of Mexico, which got a chuckle out of Hillary Clinton, even made her smile. And then there were just odd things, like in an inauguration address with the serious challenges the United States has on its its plate. He's talking about the fact that we will have two genders, male and female. And so this gets back to your mandate issue, or not issue, your question, which is, does Donald Trump run the danger that Joe Biden and most modern presidents have of overreading their mandate? Donald Trump was not elected for much of what he talked about in these speeches. He was elected to address #1, inflation. He's being handed a very good economy, but inflation has been a challenge, and to secure the border. Those two things he got support for. Other things that he's talking about, you know, the end of DEI, that is not an enormous challenge the country is facing. So he runs this danger. As Rick mentioned, it makes sense because you got to say things are bad because you're going to change them for the better. But the danger is this over-reading of a mandate that doesn't exist. He gets out above the skis of public opinion, and he pays for it in the midterm election. So all things we have to watch out for.
We're listening to some of the process here following the swearing in and inaugural address of Donald Trump. He will soon retire to a grand luncheon with lawmakers. Following the benediction, might also sign some executive orders before they even get into that luncheon, and then will, of course, make his way, along with the First Lady, once again back to the White House, which is being prepared for his arrival. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzana will stay with us throughout the day here as special live coverage continues here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We're going to bring you live to the Capitol in Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern, who has, of course, been with us since early today. Anne-Marie, Donald Trump says he will first declare a national emergency at our southern border. This is the business at hand today in the U.S. Capitol.
Absolutely. And actually, just 2 weeks ago, former Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy told me that this is actually what they should do in sort of the process of how they should legislate and get through Trump's agenda. They said they should come in, immediately declare the border an emergency. And if they do that, they can get funds immediately to the border and then focus on one big reconciliation package. So not only is this just something that Donald Trump wants to do to make sure that he's fulfilling what he thinks is that mandate, and how what Jeannie was just talking about, one of the reasons why he won this election, but also it may be part of the legislative process and make it easier to get funds to the border and then go forward with the rest of his agenda in that one big beautiful bill he talked about. I would also say what Jeannie was talking about, you almost heard of two Trumps here. He ended the speech a little bit more moderated, talking about a little bit more of unity, broad strokes about America. He said something along the lines of, in America, the impossible is what we do best, talking about the fact that he was down and out, and then he made this great political comeback. But really, the start of his speech was very much so similar to everything we've heard from Donald Trump on the campaign trail. And when you look into those ideas of the executive orders and the executive actions he wants to starting immediately, it's what he promised on the campaign trail. Things like designating cartels terrorist organization, closing the border. He talked about deportations. He also talked about drill, baby, drill, and unleashing energy independence in the United States, which may mean we will see executive orders rolling back what we've seen under the Biden administration, putting some oil and gas drilling on hold. He did mention tariffs and how other countries are making more money than the United States. We should note he did not go into details, though, when it came to those tariffs. I think all in all, mentioning the popular vote, this is a president who feels emboldened by the election, not a repudiation of the last 4 years where the Democrats had control of Washington.
All right, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern live at the Capitol for us. We'll continue to check in with Anne-Marie throughout the day. And now we want to head in to the White House, where Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall is joining us live from the North Lawn. Tyler, we just heard a great recap by Anne-Marie of the speech Donald Trump just gave, but really his day is only just beginning. What is ahead for him and for now former President Biden as they prepare to leave the Capitol?
Right. Well, Kaylee, we are expecting now President Trump to make his way over to the Capital One Arena. That's about a mile from where I am from the White House, so that he can address the crowd there, maybe sign some of these executive orders into law that he just mentioned there. And I would actually point you to our Bloomberg News Morning Console polling that came out right before Election Day that found that 68% of likely voters in those battleground states said that the country was on the wrong track. And it appears evident that Trump was trying to tap into that similar sentiment there. And as you heard Anne-Marie say, sound very much like some of the rhetoric that we heard during his rally. So we should expect likely similar remarks when he does get to Capital One Arena. Many of these executive orders widely expected, but I'll also point out one that we are waiting for additional details on, and that is when he said that he would sign some sort of memo when it comes to inflation. Of course, we know that there's been some relative economic bright spots in the U.S. economy, including easing prices and a relatively low unemployment rate. But regardless, it does appear that the economy and fighting high prices has remained a top concern for Americans and American voters. But how that squares with a potential Trump spending agenda and that reconciliation package that you heard Anne-Marie outline there, but also any potential inflationary impacts from tariffs remains to be seen.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, thank you. Live from the White House. We'll check back with Tyler in a bit as we stick with our signature panel, spending our day together here this Inauguration Day with Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. Rick, I'll remind everybody you were on the inaugural committee that helped to decide to move things indoors for Ronald Reagan in 1985. I'd be curious to hear just how you think things are going so far in terms of what is a massive production. I'll remind our radio listeners as well, about 1,800 people are in another room here, Emancipation Hall, where Donald Trump will actually visit once this is complete and deliver some unprepared remarks. Are we going to get the other Donald Trump?
Oh, I think you saw the other Donald Trump today in his remarks. This is what we've seen all during the presidential campaign. He's been anything but he's very consistent. And so I think you'll hear very similar speech to the overflow crowd. And again, his remarks at the Capital One Arena to 20,000 people who, some of which stayed overnight in frigid weather to be the first ones in that door this morning, are going to get a little bit of his time. Sort of the second back-to-back rally, basically taking the place of the parade, and that's exactly what we did in 1985. We looked for a venue where we could put people. Hundreds of thousands came to Washington in 85 like this to see the president inaugurated, and many of them won't actually be able to view it because of the bad weather, but it's going to be a really robust, busy day. Personally, I love the rotunda in the Capitol. Yeah. I think it's the pomp that Americans look for in their presidency, and even though it's always fun to see a huge crowd, I think what you saw today are the people who mean the most to Donald Trump. And so if there's any scorecard that you were looking for to see who was going to play an inordinate role in his administration, there's your picture of them.
Let's keep an ear on this benediction as it resolves, live from the U.S. Capitol on Bloomberg.
As we embark on this new chapter, we also seek your comfort, O God, for those who feel lost or disheartened. In this time of transition, may your light shine upon them, reaffirming their belief in a brighter tomorrow. May we all strive to lift one another, supporting our fellow citizens with kindness and empathy, recognizing that together we can overcome any adversity. Grant us the strength to endure, the courage to face our fears, and the clarity to see the light that remains, even when clouds of uncertainty may gather. Inspire our new leaders to be champions for the vulnerable and advocates for those whose voices are often silenced. May they pursue policies that promote the well-being of all, seeking to build bridges that will foster unity and belonging. As we stand witness to this inauguration, we hold fast to our faith in the goodness of each of us and the possibility of change. We trust that with your guidance, O God, our nation can move forward to a future filled with promise, prosperity, and understanding. And finally, we lift our hearts in gratitude for the beloved parents of President Trump. Without Mary and Fred Trump, this day would never be the miracle that has just begun. From their place in heaven, may they shield their son from all harm by their loving protection and give him the strength to guide our nation along the path that will make America great again. Let us go forth now with these words of President Trump's emblazoned on our hearts. As long as we have pride in our beliefs, courage in our convictions, and faith in our God, then we will not fail. We stand tall, we stand proud, because we are Americans, and Americans kneel to God, and to God alone. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain at your seats while the President and official party depart the platform.
President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance and their families will soon make their way out of the U.S. Rotunda. And Kaylee, we're about to witness another ceremony, the departure ceremony for the Bidens. The presidential helicopter that frequently carries the moniker Marine One, certainly when the president is on board, is actually parked on the east front of the Capitol, just outside the carriage entrance that will carry the Bidens away.
Yeah, and then, of course, they will head to Joint Base Andrews, where there will be a departure ceremony for the now former President of the United States, number 46. In the meantime, the 47th, Donald Trump, as he's making his way out of the rotunda, will head to Emancipation Hall to greet what is being referred to today as the overflow room. Given this proceedings were moved indoors, there are about 1,800 people who could not fit into the Capitol Rotunda who have watched the swearing in and address from there, and Donald Trump will be delivering some brief remarks to those who have gathered to support him.
Yeah, we'll get Donald Trump off the script here. I'll be curious to see what he has to say to that room, and will be essentially his second set of remarks here as part of the inauguration ceremony. We're watching Joe Biden, the former president of the United States now, and former First Lady Jill Biden make their way outside of the rotunda.
Of course, a one-term president, as he did not intend to be initially, or at least most recently, until he dropped his re-election bid, followed out of the rotunda by now former Vice President Kamala Harris, who, of course, lost the 2024 election to Donald Trump. And we're now seeing the most senior leadership of Congress, Steve Scalise, Mike Johnson, the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, now departing the rotunda as well.
It's been interesting to hear remarks from Chuck Schumer about the role he played in helping to convince Joe Biden to drop out of the race last summer, knowing that there's quite a bit of bad blood between the Biden family and Nancy Pelosi. Interesting, Chuck Schumer now trying to get a piece of that narrative on the way out here. He will, of course, be the Democratic leader in the Senate, continuing without Joe Biden on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue.
And remarkable as we view here those who are still just behind where the podium was, former presidents Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama, there alongside those who will soon, presumably, be confirmed to join Donald Trump's cabinet. Kristi Noem, who, of course, has been tapped for Homeland Security Secretary, and others, sharing space with members of the Trump family, his children, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, as well as Barron Trump, Tiffany Trump, all lined up there. Lara Trump, the co-chair of the RNC, as well. And just behind them, Joe, our audience here at Bloomberg TV and radio is well aware of this, as we've talked about it at length. Some tech titans worth hundreds of billions of dollars, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook, Jeff Bezos, all were given, frankly, seats of honor today.
Yeah, we had questions about what would happen to the CEO of TikTok. We can say that Shou Chew was in the room. He was not in the area that you're talking about, but was in the room as Donald Trump and Melania Trump, they're alive, making their way through the crypt. And what could be the beginning of a lot of Bolero hat sales, I think, in the next couple of days here. Kaylee, the fashion statement by Melania Trump going a long way in Washington.
Indeed. It's been much discussed already today, and I'm sure it will continue to be so, just as we will continue now our discussions with our signature political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Sheehan Zaino are now with us. And Jeannie, as we watch Donald Trump and Joe Biden making their way through the crypt, having left the rotunda, it is going to be a literal, visible picture of the transition of power when Joe Biden boards that helicopter and leaves Washington for the last time as someone who was, of course, president of the United States for the last 4 years and is no longer.
That's right. 54 years, Joe Biden has made his mark on Washington, D.C., most notably and for the longest in the U.S. Congress. And then finally, after running for president a few times, was able to ascend to the presidency in 2020, promising Democrats that he would end the Trump's takeover of the Republican Party, that he would restore civility to Washington, D.C., that he would clean up Washington, D.C., and of course, he's leaving with, as was mentioned, a lot of Democratic infighting over his legacy. He has engaged in a bit of that by saying he would have beat Donald Trump had he won. So it is a clouded legacy of a man who has given so much to his country. Clouded a lot, too, by the fact that he decided, after promising not to do so, to pardon his son. And then, as you mentioned,
and other
Kaylee,
members of his
in
family.
just the last few minutes, to pardon members of his family, including his brother and sister. So this is going to make for a lot of rethinking of who Joe Biden is. And of course, this comes just hours after he promised to end an oligarchy, or to be warned us, rather, of an oligarchy in the United States. And yet here he is departing the White House, pardoning his own family. So it's a very complicated legacy for Joe Biden. And of course, I should say, as Donald Trump goes to address this, overflow room, this is this sort of two tiers of power in D.C. Those people who made it into the 600 or so,
yes,
and those who got relegated. Sort of reminds me of when you weren't picked for well, you guys would have been picked. I wasn't always picked for the teams, the athletic teams in school. So I would have been in the overflow room, if that.
Jeannie's never seen me play dodgeball. Just
there goes the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and others making their way outside of the building here. Amy Klobuchar watching this procession as well with Rick Davis. Rick, you know Joe Biden better than most Americans, having spent a lot of time with him as a friend and colleague of Senator John McCain. What's going through your mind as he boards this helicopter to wave farewell to Washington?
Yeah, it's end of an incredibly long run and successful run, 54 years in history. And I must say, I was surprised by his farewell remarks that they didn't focus on his tenure in Washington writ large, but really almost like just focused on the last 6 months of his presidency. And it was ironic to see the oligarchs that he derided so much in that speech sitting 2 rows behind him.
Isn't that something?
At this inaugural, the titans of industry, as you said. Yeah. And so I think that the question I've got kind of going through my mind is what is his post-presidency going to be like? I mean, I really thought his farewell address would actually indicate to us a cause greater than his own self-interest, as John McCain would have probably liked to say. And where's he going to go with his time? Is he going to, be as vital a post-president as, someone who just passed Jimmy Carter, who we've been talking about a lot lately on the program? So we didn't really get a sense of that. So I do think it does show something, and that is that this election and the post-presidency, or this period between that, the election and the inaugural, the Democratic Party is without a leader and without a strategy. And there's been nothing that has been indicated between the election and today that indicates who will fill those vacuums and with what. And so even though we get to critique Donald Trump and everything he says and his, acts as president now, the question I have on my mind is, where is the loyal opposition, and who is the leader of that, and what is their agenda? Because from what I can tell today, nobody has one.
Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano stay with us throughout the day here as we watch the leaders of the inaugural ceremony make their way outdoors. They'll be assembling outside, as we mentioned, for the departure of the Bidens here. I want to get now to Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern, who is live on Capitol Hill for this moment. Anne-Marie, you've spent a couple of years covering Joe Biden here in Washington before you made your way back to New York. An important moment here, the capstone of his administration and his political career.
Right. I think it's also important to note that in the final moments of Joe Biden's presidency, he was actually sitting down in the rotunda or making his way in, but he was certainly at the Capitol, was that actually he released one final statement, and that was to pardon members of his own family. So that was something he kind of snuck in on his way out. I will say one thing is clear. He wants to make sure to the American people that at least he is showing that he is there for a peaceful transfer of power. He's done all the right things in terms of inviting President-elect Trump, when he was the president-elect, to the Oval Office, after the election, to make sure the two had a conversation. The two teams did work together. You noted that is when we saw them stand up, the Democrats in the rotunda, talking about how they worked together to release these hostages from Gaza. We saw the beginning of that release just yesterday with 3 Israeli women. And then finally, I would just note, saying welcome back to President Trump when he arrived at the White House, and then driving with him and his wife, Melania Trump, to this. So that peaceful transfer of power, something that Trump did not give to Biden graciously giving to him. But I think what a lot of Americans will remember from the Biden 4 years is something that Trump was able to tap into today. Just too much in terms of cost of everyday goods, high inflation, something that was really, this was an economy election, something that was really able to get Trump across the finish line. And that is something that Americans struggled with. On the same time, Trump talked about the fact that U.S. borders are not secure. This is something that we've seen some Democrats in Congress talk about, that they want more border security. Remember, Biden tried to get a border deal in his final year in office through Congress, was not able to do it. Trump wanted to run on the issue, even though some Republicans, like Senator Lankford, was there writing that bill. And then, of course, all the money that has been spent, because Joe Biden is leaving office with 2 foreign wars that the United States has been obviously very involved in. Men and women wearing U.S. In the U.S. services are out in the Red Sea protecting vessels. And then, of course, billions of dollars sent to Ukraine in its defense of Russia. That war now entering its 3rd year.
All right, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern live inside the Cannon office building at the Capitol. Thank you so much. Meantime, our eyes here on Bloomberg TV, and for the benefit of our audience on Bloomberg Radio, we are watching the east front of the Capitol, where Marine One, the presidential helicopter, is waiting to take now former President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden to Joint Base Andrews. Well, of course, they will depart as he has reached the end of his 4-year presidency. Joining him as he awaits to board the helicopter is the now president, Donald Trump, as well as First Lady Melania Trump.
Historic optics here, Kaylee, to the benefit of our radio audience. Joe Biden and Jill Biden are standing side by side with Donald Trump and Melania Trump. It is freezing outside. I'll remind everyone we're about 13 degrees in terms of what it really feels like here in the low 20s, the real temperature in Washington, D.C., which is why the ceremony moved indoors. But yes, this is essentially the departure ceremony here for Joe Biden. They've been sharing a couple of words, by the way, these two couples, and can only imagine what they're saying, Kayla.
Well, and the Vice President Kamala Harris giving hugs to both Joe Biden and Jill Biden, standing alongside her husband, the now former second gentleman, Doug Emhoff. We have heard repeatedly from both of these couples how close they had become during their 4 years in office together. Doug Emhoff and Kamala Harris now departing on their own. And again, we will be watching for Joe Biden and Jill Biden to board that helicopter.
As we prepare for the engines to rev up on the helicopter and the former president and first lady to board, we're joined live in Washington by Lindsay Chervinsky, presidential historian and executive director of the George Washington Presidential Library. She joins us from Mount Vernon up here in the District of Columbia, and it's great to have you back. Just the voice we wanted on not just this day, but at this moment. Talk to us about the importance of this stage of the ceremony.
Well, thank you for having me back. Yeah, I'm struck by these images. You know, what caught my eye is that former Vice President Harris said a few words to now President Trump. Yeah. And she did not do that at Carter's funeral the last time I spoke with you all. And I would dearly love to know what they were saying to one another. But, you know, it is an important moment because this is sort of the final capstone in the peaceful transfer of power, which is the bedrock of what it means to be a republic. If you have a different type of transfer, it's a different type of government.
Well, and it is a stark contrast to what we experienced just 4 years ago when Donald Trump did not attend the inauguration of Joe Biden. And, of course, remarkable as we see the Bidens making their way toward Marine One now to consider that Trump and Biden rode over to the Capitol together today after having tea at the White House, a relationship between the two of them that has been adversarial, to say the least. And that's perhaps a kind way of describing it, Lindsay. But to see them doing this now, as you say, a pillar of the American Republic, Donald Trump escorting Joe Biden physically to the helicopter, just shows how far we've come in the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think it does. You know, what you said is important is they don't have to like each other. They don't have to get along. They don't even have to necessarily enjoy the experience, but it is a part of the process. And notably, we didn't have this image from 4 years ago because Trump didn't attend. And instead, we had a split screen where he was leaving to go directly to Florida. And so, you know, for all that we might feel about this moment, I think it is worth noting and it is admirable that the Bidens are there because no one likes losing.
This is a remarkable moment that we're witnessing here as Jill Biden just gave a hug to Melania Trump. And Donald Trump was yelling over the wind to try to say something to Joe Biden. I can only imagine what that message was. The current president and first lady are now walking away from the helicopter where the Bidens have boarded. We'll now prepare for them to fly away. Kaylee, the official end of his presidency and career in Washington. Donald Trump has quite a bit ahead of him still, signing executive orders. First, he'll likely be addressing the crowd in that overflow room, as you described it, where almost 2,000 of his supporters are waiting.
As we consider now that he is president for a second time, only the second in history to serve non-consecutive terms. And Lindsay, he described it himself during his inaugural address as something of a comeback, talking about how he saw himself as having been politically persecuted over the last several years, and yet he has returned to this highest office in the country. Just talk about that turnaround of the political fate of Donald Trump, that he once again finds himself here.
Yeah, we've never seen anything like it. I mean, we have had one president lose and then come back, and that was Grover Cleveland in the 19th century, of course. But he had not been indicted. He had not played a role in inciting a violent insurrection, and those are very different political circumstances. And so to see this type of comeback is really unusual. It is surprising. I don't think anyone would have predicted it 4 years ago. And I think the ramifications of it on our political system are going to take a long time to actually unfold.
The Trumps and Vances waving goodbye to the Bidens Now the stairs have been lifted, the doors closed on the helicopter, and the Trump party is heading back indoors into the Capitol. I'm curious, as a point of inauguration trivia, we watched the swearing in very closely. I don't know if you noticed, we didn't see Donald Trump put his hand on the Bible. And I'm brought back to 2009 when Barack Obama decided to do it all over again with the Chief Justice after flubbing out an abundance of caution, as he said at the time, some of the language in the oath. Are we going to see another swearing in potentially of Donald Trump?
I don't think we will, because they're actually not required to take the oath on a Bible. John Quincy Adams took it on a book of laws and a copy of the Constitution. So the oath is actually not based on a religious foundation. It's based on a commitment to the Constitution and to the American people.
This is why we have you here, to answer questions like these. As the rotors turn on the helicopter, Kaylee, Joe Biden will soon be taking off.
Yep, making his way, of course, from the Capitol grounds to Joint Base Andrews. Well, another departure ceremony will be taking place as we say goodbye not to just Joe Biden's 4 years as president, but more than half a century of service in public office, a career politician, frankly, Lindsay, in contrast to the man who is now succeeding him and who preceded him, Donald Trump, who was not that when he was first elected. Now, he, of course, is far and away seen as the leader of the Republican Party, having not had as warm of a reception to the political world back in 2017. But he's walking into that Capitol building with both chambers of Congress behind him. How much power does that give him as an executive authority, which he's planning to exercise today through a series of executive orders, but knowing he has basically the whole of government, including a conservative Supreme Court, at his back?
Well, normally I would say that a second-term president with the limitation of the 22nd Amendment would not necessarily have that much power. Usually in the second term, a president focuses more on executive orders and foreign policy because they are a bit of a lame duck. And so their ability to shape domestic politics is limited. And yet, as you said, Trump has really remade the party in his image. We saw this week with the cabinet secretary hearings that many of the people were willing to do whatever he wanted, even if they disagreed on certain policies. And so I don't know how much pushback they're actually really going to give. Now, that being said, no president achieves everything they want. It's just kind of a political rule that I think is probably going to stand here, regardless of how much support he does have.
The presidential helicopter, many know as Marine One, is now wheels up in Washington, D.C. on a frigid 20th of January. The inaugural ceremonies largely complete for Donald Trump. Now Joe Biden and Jill Biden will get their last view of the Capitol. Kaylee, as they hover over Capitol Hill, will likely fly past the White House before making their way to Joint Base Andrews.
Incredible, as we consider that Joe Biden wanted, at least up until roughly 7 months ago, to serve a second term as president. He was hoping it would be his inauguration today, not that of another Democrat or of Donald Trump, but instead him. And reporting does suggest that he is leaving this office having still believed that he could have won this election in November. And it does make you wonder what must be going through the head of the now former first couple as they leave Washington behind them.
Isn't that right? The man he replaced has now replaced him. And you can speak to what's happening on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue as they prepare for the Trump's arrival.
Yes, so in just a couple of hours, the White House undergoes a complete shift. So usually there's some staff that stays, but there's also new staff that comes in. There's a whole team of volunteers that will pack up all of the Biden's belongings, including photographs and personal mementos. They will take out a lot of the choices that the Bidens made in terms of art and decor, especially in the Oval Office. And then all new selections will come in. Sometimes that's rugs, sometimes that's draperies, sometimes it's art and furniture, and they will complete that entire process in just a couple of hours.
It's incredible to consider, and also just in the next couple of hours, we do expect Trump could sign dozens, if not upward of 100 executive orders. Have we ever seen as potentially active a first day of a presidency as what we could see today, Lindsay?
We have. Actually, recent history has been quite intense in terms of executive orders. The overall number of them are not actually as high as Franklin D. Roosevelt, which was the peak of executive orders in the presidency. But the number on the first day does tend to have that concentration. And usually, and we saw this 4 years ago, it's a president undoing the things that their predecessor did through executive order because they didn't do it through legislation. Biden also swore in, I think, thousands of political appointees that were were at the lower level on his first day 4 years ago. So I think that it's pretty common at this point to see that type of activity. Now, the scope and breadth and the type of executive order, that might be a little bit different. I don't think that Biden or Obama attempted to rename a body of water.
All right, Lindsay Chervinsky, presidential historian and executive director of the George Washington Presidential Library at Mount Vernon. Thank you so much. We have our eyes now on Bloomberg TV and, for the benefit of our audience on Bloomberg Radio, on Emancipation Hall, the so-called overflow room today, where 1,800 people are gathered, and the now president, Donald Trump, is expected to address those gathered in the room after they were largely unable to at least see in person the proceedings in the Capitol Rotunda today, given the space constraints of an indoor ceremony.
Yeah, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers who have visited Washington, this is what's known as the Visitor Center at the U.S. Capitol. You can now see Speaker Mike Johnson on stage along with Steve Scalise, their spouses, as the Trumps make their way toward Emancipation Hall. If you're listening on the radio, this is a massive room inside the Capitol Visitor Center with the reproduction of the bronze Statue of Freedom that stands atop the Capitol Dome. A massive plaster reproduction is just behind the presidential podium that has been set up for what will be, we're told, about 10 minutes worth of remarks, off-the-cuff remarks from Donald Trump.
And while we await those, we also do want to check in at the White House, where Donald Trump will be heading later today, and turn to Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Tyler, I'm sure he will be sharing with those gathered in the room in Emancipation Hall more about what he would like to accomplish in the next 4 years, his agenda. To what extent does he have the power to enact that agenda by himself in the Oval Office, using the office of the presidency, versus, of course, having to have the cooperation of some of the very congressional leaders we have our eyes on now?
Right, exactly, Kaylee. So since we don't know which of Trump's executive orders will ultimately stand up to legal scrutiny, buy-in from Congress is going to be absolutely critical, which is why it was so important to Trump when both of the chambers went for Republicans in November. Now, he's largely applauded Republican congressional leaders, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, who you just saw on stage there, as well as Senate Majority Leader John Thune, both of them getting shout-outs last night during Trump's rally at the Capital One Arena. Now, when it comes to what Congress ultimately can do, I just spoke to one congressional Republican aide to Senate leadership who said to prepare for Congress to start using what's known as the Congressional Review Act. That's a legislative tool that essentially lets Congress roll back some of the recent rules enacted under the Biden administration.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, thank you so much, live from the White House. Tyler, we'll get back to you in a few. That's going to be a very busy place a couple of hours from now, as Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is at the podium in anticipation of Donald Trump. Let's put an ear on this live on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We have the chance to make the next 4 years the most consequential period in our nation's history. And as Speaker of the House, it is my great pleasure, my great honor, to introduce to you the man who will lead us to this new golden age, the decisive winner of the Electoral College and the popular vote, the 45th and the 47th, and the greatest president of our lifetimes, Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have entered the room, as you can hear the USA chants making their way now up onto the stage alongside J.D. Vance. He's going to be making some remarks here in a moment. Kaylee, having come off the script at this point of the day, I wonder what will come up. We, for instance, did not hear reference to Ukraine in his speech. but he is clearly somebody who likes to warm up to a crowd and start riffing, and this could be interesting. Not something that is typically part of a presidential inauguration.
Yeah, of course, this follows a pre-inauguration rally he held at Capitol Run Arena yesterday, where he will return to once again address supporters later this afternoon. But Vice President J.D. Vance is speaking now. Let's listen.
That was a good way to start it off. You know, I didn't know exactly what the president would put in that speech, and I hoped to myself that he wasn't going to hold back, and, sir, you didn't hold back. That was a hell of a way to start the next 4 years. But I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for the president and for all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you for making this possible. We love you. We wouldn't be here without you, and we're going to make America great again together for the next 4 years. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, having stood outside for about 5 minutes to wave goodbye to the Bidens, thank God we moved that thing indoors, because it was a beautiful ceremony and it was cold as hell outside. So, sir, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
No, he's right. I looked, I said, oh, look at this beautiful sunny day. We blew it. And then I went outside and we were freezing. You would have been very unhappy. The sun was very deceptive, I will tell you. It is cold out. And I'm sort of saying, you know, that was so beautiful today. Maybe they should do it there every 4 years. Does that make sense? I don't know. Because, you know, the outdoor thing is really good, but it gets a little cold around this time of the year, as some people have noticed. And a lot of times they suffer through it. There was no suffering in that room. It was 72 degrees. It was perfect with the best acoustics I think I've ever heard in a room. This is not so bad either. But I just want to say, you're a younger, far more beautiful audience that I just spoke to. And I want to keep it off the record. I want to keep that off the record. Because I don't want to have all those big shots up there. I don't want to think you're more powerful than them, you look better than them, and I love you. Now, we just had a great time. We just had a great day. This was amazing. You know, when you think we took a journey, I mentioned in the speech, a lot of people said that was not a journey that was possible, and it was indeed possible. I didn't really know too much about what they were saying when they said that, but a lot of people felt it. And we hooked up with J.D. very early. I watched J.D. over a period of time. I endorsed him in Ohio. He was a great senator and very, very smart. The only one smarter than him was his wife. That was I would have chosen her, but somehow the line of succession didn't work that way, right? But now she's great and he's great. This is a great, beautiful couple and unbelievable career. I just said to him, you are very upwardly mobile, because he hasn't been doing it that long, but he picked it up so quickly. Remember, the first week was a little bit like the fake news was hitting him really hard. And I said, ooh, this may be tough, but after that, it was smooth sailing for him. He took on everybody. He took on the meanest. I don't want to use the word corrupt because we're into a new system, so let's wait till the corruption begins, because it will. But he took on some pretty mean people, and he handled it well. I want to also congratulate Mike Johnson for the job that he's doing. Steve, we gave him a majority of almost nothing. And then I said, to make it tougher on him, let me take 2 or 3 of the people, right? I said, he'll only have to suffer with that for about 3 months. How are they doing, by the way? Are they? Is that moving along?
Totally unified.
I said, do you mind if I take this one, that one, and a couple of others? He didn't mind. He can handle it. No, he's a man that's liked by everybody. I've never met a man like this. You've got how many is it, 219 or 220 or something? 220. And of the 220, 219 really like him. I noticed he got 1 negative vote once about 2 weeks ago. But I think even 220 like him, if you want to know the truth. And that's very unusual. I know a lot of nice guys in Congress, and they have 35 people that hate him. So if you have 35 people that hate you and you only have 1 or 2 or 3 votes, you'll have 5, I think. But that's going to be like, you know, the good news is when we get to that 5 number, it's going to feel like a massive majority. You could be really nasty to a couple of them at least, you know? So it's going to feel like hitting your head on the wall and stopping. It feels so good to stop, but he's done a fantastic job. And Steve Scalise is, he's our hero because, I was with him. You talk about being shot. I was with him. He got some bad ones, and his incredible wife, and she really loves him. You never know about that. I've been with other people that were doing poorly, and the wife is like looking at her watch. She can't get out of the hospital fast enough. How's he doing? Oh, I don't know. He's all right. That woman was a mess. She was crying and crying. No, they're going to take him. They're going to take him. I told Steve when he finally woke up, it was a while, too. The doctor told me it was the most blood they've ever transfused in any patient. They've never done anything like it. And here he is, the picture of strength, right? And he's been a great friend of mine, right? With a family, because of a family. And what a job you did. It worked out pretty much better than we even thought, right? And I did have a couple of things, to say that were extremely controversial. And between J.D. and Melania and anybody else that heard, please, sir, it's such a beautiful unifying speech. Please, sir, don't say these things. I said, I'm telling you, it's going to play great. They say, you're right. For this group of people, it's going to play great. You're the only ones I hurt by not, but we had some beauties, didn't we, Melania? She said, sir. Calls me sir when she's angry. No, I'm only kidding. I better say I'm only kidding, or the press is going to pick that one up loud and clear. No, but she said, no, I think it would be terrible. It's such a nice speech. I think it's, it all depends on your delivery. How was the delivery? Was it good? But she said it's such a beautiful speech. You can't put things in there that you were going to put in. And I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because, it's action, not words that count. And you're going to see a lot of action on the J6 hostages. See a lot of action. And I was going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes, like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, where they literally, what they did is they destroyed and deleted all of the information, all of the hearings, practically not a thing left. They deleted all the information on Nancy Pelosi having turned down the offer of 10,000 soldiers. You wouldn't have needed 10,000. You could have had 500, and they would have stopped. Because we may have had 1 million people that day, the people that were there. You don't see any photographs, but we have a lot of great photos. But you don't see those photographs. They don't put them in. They show the people at the Capitol. But I was talking about that. I was going to talk about that. They said, please don't bring that up right now. You can bring it up tomorrow. I said, how about now in front of the I'll bring it up right now. This little time delay is good because we're getting great reviews on the speech. Now watch. They'll take the speech and say, I didn't like it because he left there and he's talked to people. But we're giving you a little more information than we gave upstairs. But no. They pardoned a lot of people. They pardoned, before we even get to today, they pardoned, 33 murderers, absolute murderers, the worst murderers. When you get the death sentence in the United States, you have to be bad because they don't give it much. And he pardoned almost everybody having a death sentence. And if you went through the crimes that were committed, you wouldn't even believe them, the level of violence. The people that were killed, the innocence of people that were killed and children killed by these people, and he pardoned them for whatever reason. He spared them, but they didn't spare the people that they killed, and who knows what happens in the future. It's one of the worst because a lot of times they let them out early after that. They say you're going to be in for life, but then all of a sudden they get let out for good behavior, and then they go on a rampage. It's one of those little things, right? But I was going to talk about that. But I was really going to talk about the level of, what's going on. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to help a guy like Millie Why are we doing Miller? He was pardoned. What he said, terrible what he said. Why are we helping some of the people? Why are we helping Liz Cheney? I mean, Liz Cheney is a disaster. She's a crying lunatic and crying Adam Kinzinger. He's a super crying. I never saw the guy not crying. He's always crying. I looked at him. I remember years ago he was actually on my side. And then one day, you know, when you don't want to kill people in wars, they turn against you. Liz Cheney hated the concept of not going to war with everybody. Let's kill everybody. Let's spend a lot of money on military equipment, you know, where her father works, right? And but what she did was incredible. Think of it. They destroyed and deleted all of that information that went on for almost 2 years against Trump. And the reason they did, because it was all false, like the person that said, I tried to strangle a Secret Service agent. That's one of the toughest human beings I think I've ever seen. I actually had a friend saying, please don't change that, sir. You are the coolest sucker in history. Remember, she said, I put my hands around his neck because he wouldn't go to the Capitol. Made up fiction. And I was rebuffed. And the guy on the right is a massive weightlifter, probably stronger than me. Do you think he's stronger than me, honey? You know who I'm talking. Possibly stronger than me. Slightly younger than me, like, I won't say how many years because I don't want to talk about that, but a lot of years. But I had a friend that said, why are you disputing that story? That's the coolest story I've ever heard. That I would attack a karate champion, get slightly rebuffed, and then throw my arms around a guy with a neck about this big. Even though there are bars, you know, there are bars, you can't really do that anyway. So I wanted to talk about that. But all of that stuff got deleted. And the reason it got deleted is they were all caught in lies. You know, Secret Service testified, and they said it didn't happen. Actually, the two guys were very embarrassed. They're suffering because their friends are saying, did Trump really do that to you? But they gained a whole new respect for me. But it was just make-believe stuff, and there were a lot of make-believe stories made up. So rather than suffer the wrath, like the story with Nancy Pelosi, I offered her 10,000 soldiers. She knows it. She admitted it on tape that her daughter made. She's a videographer or whatever you call her, which I'm glad she is. Oh, she can't be in good stead with Nancy. But Nancy said it was my responsibility as she's leaving the Capitol. She said it was, and it was. She's in charge of security at the Capitol. But I offered them up to 10,000 soldiers, even more. One time I said more, as many as you need. But you needed 400 or 500. If 4 or 5, you 10,000, that would be more than the number of people there by lot. But we offered her 10,000. Think of it, 10,000 soldiers. In other words, J6 wouldn't be J6. There would have been no J6. But she rebuffed them. She didn't like it. No, she didn't like it. Maybe she wanted that to happen. But she's guilty as hell. And now we would have to go through the process because they destroyed all evidence. They deleted everything. There's virtually nothing left. The other fake story and so many other fake stories. And many people came out on our side. And those people now, we've got to find them. There's nothing left. So that's a criminal offense. If that were a civil case, it would be a criminal offense. If that happened civilly where you did that, it would be a criminal offense. So I decided I'm not going to make this speech complicated. I'm going to make it beautiful. I'm going to make it a unifying speech. And then when they said we have a group of people that are serious Trump fans, I said, this is the time to tell those stories. He knows. So I do that. But seriously, I'd like to, I think it was a tremendous success. I think we're very lucky we put it inside because it is really cold. We just went to the helicopter out of respect to something that's taken place for a long time. I guess it's as old as helicopters. You used to get into a stagecoach, now you get into a helicopter. Times change. But it's pretty old custom. And it's a beautiful custom, actually. It's a beautiful custom. I wish we could have had a better relationship. I wish we could have had a better relationship between Republicans and Democrats. I was with Senator Schumer. I said, Chuck, I think it's time we all start getting along a little bit because it doesn't make sense. I mean, we literally never get a Democrat vote. They never get a Republican vote, almost. And although there is a bill coming up very shortly that we have a lot of Democrat votes, right? It's going to be a very beautiful bill. We're going to have a deciding, I would say, within a week or so, I think. And it's going to be a very good bill. You all know what I'm talking about. So I just want to thank you all for being here. You have been our fans from day one. All these people all over. You've been our fans. This has been there's never been anything like it. There's never been anything like it. This has been a movement like no movement ever in history for probably any country, let alone this country. You know, if somebody's running for president, and if they go out and they announce they're going to Arizona, they're going to Nevada, they're going to someplace, if you have 200 or 300 people, that would be standard. Ronald Reagan would go out. I mean, outside of the last couple of days where people get a little excited, but even then you have a couple of thousand people. But if you're going to go someplace, any place, any one of the swing states, any one of the other states, I mean, how about the non-swing states? We won Alabama by 48 points. We won Tennessee by massive numbers. Wyoming, we won by numbers that are, nobody's ever seen numbers like that. And, you know, places like California, we did great, but when they send out like 38 million ballots, nobody knows where the hell they're sending them, and then they come pouring back, the whole thing. You know, they passed a law in California that if you work in an election bureau and if you so much as ask for a voter ID, if you say, sir, ma'am, could I please look at your voter ID? They have the right to put you in jail. You're a criminal. Can you believe that? There's only one reason that happens. They want to cheat. So they had it where voter ID wasn't accepted. But now if you even ask for it, this is seriously a bill that was just signed, passed in their legislature, and it was signed. And I think when we get things cleaned up and we get back to a little bit of normalcy, I'm going to ask the Speaker to really get involved, because I think we would have won the state of California, because, you know, if you look at my numbers with Hispanic, we're at 56%. And we were winning. We won the Texas border that had never been won. As the governor said, he's doing a good job, the governor, by the way, of Texas. But as the governor said, it hasn't. Oh, did I get lucky? Did I get lucky? Supposing I said, you know, he's not here, but the governor of Texas has done a terrible job. Wow, look at you. You mean we couldn't get you up in the front row? I tell you. Supposing I said, J.D., the governor of Texas, is not doing his job. You heard what I said. See, I didn't know you were there. I said he's doing a great job. He's doing a phenomenal job. But now you're going to have a partner that's going to work with you, because you didn't have. Not only didn't he have a partner, he had people selling the wall, right? We have a fence structure that we worked on, the governor worked on with me. And I didn't love it, to be honest with you. I wanted a nice precast concrete, you know, 40, 50 feet high, like a beautiful, could have been a T-shape, Y-shape. I love construction. I wanted that sucker to go up maybe 50, 60 feet. It would have looked beautiful, a nice Y shape. And they said, the problem is, sir, they climbed that like a rabbit. I said, what do you mean? No way. And they brought some of these guys out. They climbed it like... And the other thing is you hit it with acid and the thing will disintegrate. You know, they have things for concrete. So they needed very hardened steel, very special steel. And then they needed 7,000-pound concrete inside that steel, inside that steel. And then they have a rebar that's the toughest steel made. Very hard to cut. So this is why very little is cut. I mean, it's right. And then they put a anti-climb panel on top. I hated it. I said, it's so unattractive. And I said, why would that work? I don't believe it works. And I went to watch the Border Patrol, gave a display. We had actually two sets of climbers. The guys that climb up walls with drugs on their back, I mean, they got like 60, 70 pounds of drug, and they go as fast as you can walk. They go bip, bip, bip. Or we have Mount Everest-type climbers. And honestly, the drug guys were much better. I couldn't believe it. The drug guys blew them away, right? But it's true, the anti-climb panel, they couldn't get around it. They just couldn't. When you didn't have it, So sometimes you sacrifice beauty for efficiency, and we did. So we built this wall, and we built over 500 miles of wall. That's why we had such good numbers. The famous chart that came down, very thankfully, the chart that came down on my right, Governor. Had I not looked over there, I'm not speaking right now. You might be speaking here. You want to know the truth? You, JD, and got a lot of great people in this party, but I got very lucky, but we had the best numbers we've ever had. But I bought, what happens is when you fill it up, it's like water. You fill it up. Now we have 571 miles of wall. And they would always say, when we renovated a wall, so there'd be like a piece of plywood sitting there for 60 years, or a 2x4 sitting for 60 years on the ground and rotting. Because, and they'll say, you didn't build a new wall. Here we're building 50 feet up in the air, and 30 feet sections, 50-foot sections, all steel, all concrete, all everything. And all, by the way, they don't even want me to say this, but what the hell, doesn't take that long time. They were all wired for all of the equipment. We put wires in everything so they can easily wire for all the different types of equipment. And if there's a doubt, we have a wire. Whenever we just look, you just find the wires all over the place up top, so we could just hook it up. We don't have to have wires on the outside, which wouldn't do too well, right? So anyway, we built an extra 200 miles of wall, and the governor wanted to buy it. He tried to buy it, and they wouldn't sell it to him. He wanted to put it up himself. Could have been done in 3 to 4 weeks, 200 more miles, because when you do it now, they just keep going further out, getting around. So we did an extra 200 miles, and it was all bought. And they announced that they're not going to put it up. And that's when I realized they wanted open borders. And that's when I realized that people are going to come pouring through the wall like nobody's ever seen before. But you've seen it. A lot of you are here because of that. I made it my number one issue. They all said inflation was the number one issue. I said I disagree. I think people coming into our country from prisons and from mental institutions is a bigger issue for the people that I know. And I made it my number one. I talked about inflation too, but how many times can you say that an apple has doubled in cost? I'd say it, and I'd hit it hard, but then I go back to the fact that we don't want criminals coming into our country. We don't want the jails of every country in the world virtually being deposited into the United States. And that man had to suffer with it. And he did an unbelievable job. I'll tell you, he was a very popular governor, but now he's like an unbeatable governor because of your border policies. He was fantastic. And he really was. So. Governor Abbott he's a great man, great leader. And but it did make him did you do it? You didn't do that for politics. You did it because you wanted to do the right thing. But I'll tell you, it sure as hell worked for politics, too. It's self-preservation, that's right. But no, because the people are demanding it. The people of Texas are demanding it. The people are demanding it all over. So anyway, we built it, and they wouldn't let us use it. They wouldn't let the governor use it. And other governors, they wouldn't let him use it. But he was the leader of the pack and did a great job. And then we heard about a month ago that not only wouldn't they let us use it, they were selling it. They were going to sell it for 5 cents on the dollar. Now, 5 cents on the dollar then, but today it would cost more than twice as much to build because we bought it like 6 years ago. And it was just sitting on the ground, and that does not do well for the whole thing. But it was just sitting on the ground, and I heard about it, and I called the governor, and I called a lot of people, your attorney general. And here's the story. They were going to buy it, and these are great business people. They were going to buy it for 5 cents on the dollar or less. And they were calling us up, we'll sell it to you for 200 cents on the dollar. In other words, it will cost you twice as much, so it's 200 cents on the dollar. I said, can somebody explain that to a judge? I mean, how corrupt is that? You'd think they'd say, maybe we'll sell it to you for 20 cents, 30 cents, but not 200 cents. So they were going to buy something for 5 cents, and they were going to sell it to us for a fortune. They were going to make they'd have it down in Fortune magazine, they'd put it as the deal of the year, okay? You buy something like that. But it was so corrupt and so horrible. And when we told that to the administration, they didn't care. They just kept going forward. They couldn't care less. And they kept going forward. They knew that they were trying to sell it back to us. They would have sold it back to us. You would have ended up buying it. You would have paid probably 50, 60 cents, who knows. But they were going to use it for scrap metal, but then they made a much better deal. They could just buy it and sell it to us for 15, 20 times what they paid. 20 times, think of it, like 20 times what they paid. And we wouldn't let it happen. And the governor with his attorney general, Ken Paxton, they made a fantastic, a good lawyer. He's pushed around pretty good by people, right? I said, you got a great attorney general. They should leave him alone. He was with me. But Ken and the governor went to court, and a judge actually became incensed and actually called for an investigation. How could a thing like this happen? So he stopped it. So we're waiting to put that wall up. And now that you have a new president, that wall will go up so fast. The governor will complain, sir. This is Greg Abbott, sir. Please, the wall is going up too fast. Please don't do that. You know the story about winning. No, we're going to win too much. We're winning too much. Please, stop. People always love that one. We'll do this with the wall. Governor Abbott calls, sir, the wall is going up too fast. We can't take it. We just can't take it. No, I think you'll be very happy if the wall goes up too fast, right? But we'll get that done. We'll work with you on that. But it was a great decision by a great Texas judge, right? And it was beautiful to watch. He stopped them right in their track. I mean, they were literally loading this stuff onto trucks. It was terrible. Honestly, it was terrible. And he wouldn't take it. So I'm so glad I mentioned that they have a really good governor in Texas. And I swear, I didn't know he was here. I swear to you, it sounds like a setup. I didn't know you would end. Did I get lucky? I said the right thing. Because there have been moments when I wasn't so happy with him, you know? But not too many, I can tell you that. So anyway, it's good to see you too, Governor. Great. But I just want to thank everybody. You've been incredible. I recognize so many of you. It's so crazy. But this has been a long journey. This was a journey that started in 2015, probably started 20 years before that. People used to say, you're going to run for president? You're going to run? And I always said, no, I don't want. And then one day I said, let's give it a shot. And what I talked about then was the border, too. I think it probably was the number one issue for me. Back in 2015, 2016, I talked about the border. And now I talked about the border, but this border is much worse. We fixed the border. It was totally fixed. There was nothing to talk about. 2020, by the way, that election was totally rigged, but that's okay. It was a rigged election. You know the only thing good about it? It showed how bad they are, showed how incompetent, and frankly, historically, this is a much bigger event. If that would have gone like it should have, the bad thing about it is some bad things happen, like a lot of people in our country that wouldn't be in our country right now. So, you know, that's the bad part. But I will say that it started in 2015, and right from the beginning, we went to the top. Day one, they announced Trump, and Trump went to number one and stayed there for the whole primary. And then we took on Hillary. She didn't look too happy today. We took on Hillary. A very nice person, but we took on Hillary and we defeated Hillary, and then we did much better the second time in 2020. You know, we got millions more votes. We got millions, like 10, 12 million more votes than we did the first time. No president has ever gotten that many more votes. I got like 9 million more than anybody else had ever gotten, and they said we lost. And because of that, I said to Melania, what do you think? And she said, you want to do this again? And had we lost, and had I thought we lost, I wouldn't do it again, because that's like the ultimate poll, right? But I knew how well we did, and this time we made it too big to rig. It was so big. They tried like hell in the butt. They tried to do it, and around 9:02 they gave up. Last time they did bad things, but this time they just said, yes. You know, I don't know if you saw, Mr. Speaker, in Washington, they had placards. They were all set to march. They thought it'd be closer. A gentleman asked me, a very respected gentleman asked me yesterday, how come the polls were so wrong? They showed you winning, but not in a landslide. I said, because people that are true Trumpers are so angry at the whole polling system and at the writers, the fake news, that they don't want to talk to anybody. So when you call somebody from Trump who are you voting for? They say, it's none of your business. I'm not telling you. And that was probably 40% of the people they called. So they would discard that one, and they didn't show that. And then when the election happened, the vote came, and it was much different, much higher than we're going to win, but they really thought, they couldn't believe the one man said, it was so much higher. We won all 7 swing states. We won the popular vote by millions of votes, which is hard for a Republican. I'll tell you who came through. The unions came through. The auto workers were great. The Teamsters were great. The firemen were great. I think almost every union was great. The only one that weren't great, although Sean was great, and the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters, was fantastic. But generally speaking, the head of the union was against Trump, but the union would be with us for like 80, 85%. Look what we did with the auto workers in Michigan. Look what we did with the Teamsters. The Teamsters were unbelievable. They were a solid Democrat vote, and they voted for Trump. So we had a great experience. Now we have to go to work and get it done, because we have to do something that's going to be great. We're going to turn our country around. And we're going to turn it around fast. And I think this was a better speech than the one I made upstairs, okay? I think this was better, J.D. I think this was much better. And I got to see my friend. So, Governor, take care of yourself. You call me. We'll start working. You know what that means with him? He's going to be calling me tomorrow morning at about 6. And I said, how about next week? You call me and we're going to get it started real fast. We'll really help you a lot. You've done a fantastic job protecting something which it's not supposed to be for the states. And amazing job you've done. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody. And I have a First Lady who's been incredible. I shouldn't say this. I'm going to get hell when I say this, but her feet are absolutely aching, those heels. And we thought we were leaving. We were going home. Sir, would you be able to go down and say hello to some of your other fans that are here? I said, oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Did you get to see pretty clearly the picture, I hope? Good. That's good. But because you wouldn't want to make the same speech again, right? But she said, darling, I love you so much, but my feet are killing me. I said, honey, let me just see how far it is. I asked the person. Oh, not that long, maybe 400 or 500 yards. That's 5 football fields. I said, can you make it? She said, we're going to make it no matter what. We're going to make it because we have to get, right? Right? And then we went out to the helicopter, though, just prior to this and said goodbye. And it's a custom, and the wind is blowing like crazy. And with the hat that she's wearing, she almost blew away. We almost lost off her. She was being elevated off the ground. She almost blew away. No. So we all appreciate it because she's been a great First Lady, a beautiful and a great First Lady. And they love our First Lady. J.D., whenever I make a speech, I see hundreds of times, we love our First Lady. We love, and they do, and they should. She's great. So I just want to thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody. And I felt that I said to J.D., should we give him the A treatment, the B treatment, the C, the D, or the F? You know what the F is? Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye. I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Governor. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
President Donald Trump speaking off the cuff for some time in the overflow room following the formal inaugural address, reminding us of the Trump we encountered at so many rallies over the course of the longest presidential campaign in modern history. He said, I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because it's action, not words, that count. He said he was going to talk about the things that Joe did today, referring to the pardons that were announced earlier by Joe Biden, and then riffed on a number of issues from inflation to the border Let's go live to Capitol Hill right now with Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern, who had an ear on all of that. It might take us some time to fact-check everything he said, Anne-Marie, but that's the more familiar Donald Trump that so many of his supporters are used to.
Absolutely. Vintage Trump. It was like another campaign stop, this second speech. And he even said he thought this speech was better than the one he gave upstairs, the official inauguration speech, where he stuck to script. This one, he did not. You are absolutely right. He was completely off the cuff. He was still, if you can imagine, the man was just sworn in as the 47th president of the United States, a incredible political comeback after he was the 45th president of the United States. And he is still talking about election rigging, which has no facts to it. So you can see here he's still filled with some grievances. While all of this has been going on all morning, though, if we can shift a little bit to policy, he did mention one thing in that speech that I thought was most notable. He said his team kept wanting him to talk about inflation and the economy. We know this is something that really dogged the Biden campaign. And he said to his team, how many times am I going to talk about the price of apples going up? I think it's the border. I think that's what Americans are so nervous about. Well, when you look at the slew of executive orders that are about to come out today, they are solely focused on the border. And then we have received, the press has received, the first accord statement from Trump's new administration. And the first thing it talks about is make America safe again. He will take bold action to secure our border and protect American communities. So you can see this is something he wants to specifically focus on the first 100 days and something that he truly thinks he has a mandate from the American people to do so.
Well, it was interesting, Anne-Marie, as he made these remarks, he was flanked by Vice President J.D. Vance on one side and the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, on the other, who at times looked almost a little bit uncomfortable as Donald Trump turned around to say things to him like, hey, I gave you a thin majority. And then he said, hey, can I take 2 or 3 of the people? It was almost like he was poking fun at the very difficult numbers that is the reality of the Republican-controlled, barely House of Representatives. Just speak to the difficulty Mike Johnson has ahead of him in trying to get done everything Donald Trump would like to get done.
Absolutely. They can joke about it today, but starting tomorrow, it's going to be a lot of hard work for Speaker Johnson as he tries to actually enact this agenda through. Not only does he have the slimmest Republican majority they have ever had in history, but Donald Trump plucked 2 of those to join his administration, well, 3 if you could consider Matt Gaetz, but had to drop out. But of course, we have the UN ambassador coming from New York Congressional District, Elise Stefanik, as well as, of course, Mike Waltz from Florida, who's coming in as his national security advisor. Those elections have to get done. So they have an even slimmer majority than they are going to have once they have those elections. It's still going to be incredibly slim, but they're starting off without those 3 seats. So incredibly challenging days ahead for Speaker Johnson. We should also note, not just challenging to enact Donald Trump's agenda, they still have to finish spending. That is coming up in March. And as well, they have to raise the debt ceiling. The U.S. will not be able to pay its prior bills come this summer. Now, this was a point of contention at the end of last year in December. Remember, Donald Trump said we should have had this done. It should be voted on. People I've been speaking to said Speaker Johnson didn't want to take up that vote before his next speaker vote to become the speaker once again. He didn't want to put Republicans in that very difficult position to take a controversial vote when these are the individuals that say we need fiscal restraint, saying you have to vote to increase the debt limit. So Donald Trump wanted the decks cleared before this day, before he came in as the 47th president. They weren't able to do it. So before we get to his agenda, which he's poking fun as a slim majority, they have a lot of other orders of business to get to.
All right, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern live at the Capitol, in the Capitol facilities. Thank you so much. We, of course, have just seen Donald Trump, the 47th president, leaving Emancipation Hall. He will now head to the president's room, where he is expected to hold a signing ceremony with Vice President J.D. Vance. That is when we expect that the first executive orders of his presidency could be signed. The White House now saying that Trump will be ending leasing to massive wind farms, part of energy and border-oriented executive orders we already had seen leaked to the media and, of course, outlined in the scripted inauguration speech that Donald Trump gave. Of course, what we all just listened to moments ago was the unscripted version to the overflow room, in which he talked about a number of things, including those who have been convicted of crimes regarding the riot at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. And joining us now from the White House with more is Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Tyler, he said there would be action. He said action is better than words. When will that action come?
Right. Well, Kaylee, we have to remember that acts of clemency is actually one of those areas where the chief executive does have broad power when it comes to issuing pardons. We know that at least 1,500 people have been charged in connection to that riot on January 6, 4 years ago. And President Trump's Vice President J.D. Vance has suggested that that blanket pardon would likely apply to non-violent offenders, those convicted of misdemeanor crimes. However, we also do know that the chief of police on Capitol Hill has urged President Trump to not pardon anybody who has any crimes on the record related to any incidents with Capitol Hill police officers during that day. We know that his Attorney General designate Pam Bondi also said that while she would look at each of these cases individually, she also condemned any violence against Capitol Hill police. However, important to note that during his remarks, he did take aim at President Biden, his outgoing pardons for some of his family members and also some political opponents of Trump. So pardons, acts of clemency, something that the president has broad authority over, coming to the top of the news today.
Tyler, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall posted up at the White House for the balance of the day here. We'll get back with Tyler in a bit as we bring you a live look at a dressed-up statuary hall, dressed up for lunch. This is the grand luncheon with lawmakers and members of the incoming administration that Donald Trump and Melania Trump will be sitting down for shortly. This is part of the tradition and part of the inaugural ceremony back inside the U.S. Capitol. And we reassemble our signature panel now to talk this out. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, alongside Jeannie Shanzano, senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress, political science professor as well at Iona University. We need to unpack this speech for a bit. And when I say speech, I mean the second one, the offhand remarks that followed the inaugural address. Jeannie, that was quite a stem winder, and he didn't have a lot of nice things to say in this one. This was, I guess, the retribution speech that maybe he preferred to deliver. He gave himself a grade of A+.
Yeah, not surprisingly, a grade of A+, as we always hear from President Trump. And you know, I thought he seemed much more comfortable, energetic, giving this speech. And, you know, we talked about the fact the inaugural address, for parts of it, he seemed very monotone, very reserved for Trump. But this was more the Trump we know. Yeah, the Trump from the campaign, the Trump at the rallies. He was jovial. And he also had, in addition to those things that Anne-Marie and Tyler laid out, I will also note he's talking about things that are not widely supported by the American public, like shutting down the Department of Education, which is something they talked about in Project 2025. These are the kinds of things that can get him into a host of trouble if he tries to deliver on them. So I thought that was a really important moment to underscore. But, you know, I would just also say, for the oldest president ever inaugurated, he has an awful lot of energy, and he is somebody who a long day doesn't seem to bother him at all. You know, Melania Trump's feet may hurt, but he's prepared to go on and on. But I should note, he is not wearing 3-inch heels or whatever she has on, so she's got a bit of a tougher job in that.
They looked actually higher than
they looked higher.
The heels and the hat, all of it comprising the inaugural outfit of the First Lady. Rick, when we consider the second speech he gave, he talked about how he thought he would have won California this time around, that the 2020 election was rigged. Having just once again become president of the United States, we're still relitigating these things. And I wonder at what point, if at ever, Donald Trump decides that's no longer a productive course of inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, even going back to 2015, you know, and litigating some of the things that were going on there and talking about how at that time I said it was going to be the immigration. And, you know, that thread ran through the speech, including an entire 10 minutes on how to actually technically build a border wall, you know, including how much cement you got to use and what kind of materials. Really, I mean, the guy goes deep when it comes to some of these issues. No, I mean, look, it's, as he said, it's the speech he wanted to give without speechwriters and handlers telling you what the day's supposed to bring. Suffice it to say, he stepped all over the speech that he had, and maybe we'll think about that California tally if they hadn't, if the election workers hadn't run off all of his votes, maybe he would have won. I think everyone just takes that as his typical hyperbole. We got to expect a lot of that for the next 4 years. And we saw a lot in his first term, and we're going to see even more in his second term.
That was the feeling there, though, for a moment, right? You forgot what it was like, didn't you, Jeannie?